just waiting for our other speaker to arrive on the podium, then start. This is the lady of the hour. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings to you all. My name is Sanda Nodada. I'll be your program director for today. I work for the Independent Electoral Commission, which is the IEC. I'm a senior communications and outreach officer. In our midst, I would like to acknowledge everyone that came today and honored our invitation. I just want to mention a few of our guests that are here today, just from the audience, before I introduce the speakers. We have representatives from WUSU University, Walter Sisulu University. We have representatives from Nelson Mandela University. We have representatives from Rhodes University, as well as those coming from the clergy. I would like to greet you all, as well as my counterparts, which are the media from various radio stations within the province. I greet you all. Not forgetting my colleagues, all of them, and my manager, Mrs. Stanworth. I greet you all, colleagues. Before we start, we need to appreciate that this month is Women's Month. I would just like to say Happy Women's Day, because it was on a Saturday, so I couldn't wish everyone here a happy Women's Day, but I would like to do so, and may every woman here give a round of applause, especially to, and then we just to request the males that are present in the room to stand and appreciate our ladies. I just want to also highlight the purpose of today. I think with everyone that is here, they received their invitations. Or we decided also the program will be, I sent most of the colleagues and the audience that is here today the programs. As you can see there, our banner to my left, it says Go Green. So we are practicing going green, promoting an environmentally friendly workspace, so we don't want to waste paper. So the programs are on your phones. I sent them through WhatsApp. Those that do not have can maybe share with the others that don't. Today we are here to discuss, or you are here invited for our thought leadership session. The IEC, I think with each and every organization, we have something, we operate on an annual operational plan. An annual operational plan is a document that leads us into our projects, on how we're going to go about our projects for the year. So part of that is our thought leadership sessions. We are mandated to have 2 thought leadership sessions for this financial year, which is 2024-2025, 2026. So we have our 2 thought leadership sessions. We'll be having another one in October. So this is the first one that we are having, and the focus on our first thought leadership, we thought that it must be of the youth, because youth is one of the drivers in our electoral democracy. We want to promote electoral democracy through our youth, and also understand why youth is not participating in democracy. This is the purpose of our event today. Why you're not participating, even when you are registered, you are not participating. And also you want to gauge as to why the other gender, which is female, are participating more than males. Why is it so that we get more females in the democratic space? And then when it comes to occupying positions of power, we see a lot of males occupying those positions, but with female votes being at hand. So we just want to understand how can we mitigate those factors as to make better, how can the IEC assist those, the youth that are not participating in democracy. So we're going to unpack these through we have our speakers present today that are going to unpack these topics, and then I would also like or request the audience to also participate and ask questions that you are feeling that you need clarity on or wanting to know. So this event is for you. It's for you to pose these questions, no matter how difficult they are. This is the space. But just to bear in mind that you don't ask us service delivery questions, because we are not the government. But you can ask anything pertaining to democracy and what you want to know about the IEC. We welcome those. Before I begin, we have a statement that was published by our CEO on Women's Day. So I just want this to be a reflection on our discussions today that will unfold, and to see where the gap is. The statement goes like this. It's from our CEO, Mr. Sai Mababulo. Tomorrow, as we commemorate Women's Day, we celebrate not only the courage of the women who marched on the Union buildings in 1956, we're also celebrating the remarkable women who continue to champion electoral democracy in South Africa today. The 2024 national and provincial elections delivered a powerful testament to women's commitment to electoral participation. Women comprised of, please take note of these figures, of 55% of our 27.7 million registered voters, and women accounted for nearly 58% of e-voter turnout. This is an unequivocal statement that South African women are leading the change on matters electoral matters, that their voices reverberated loudly at the ballot box, thus driving electoral democracy forward with conviction and purpose. Yet women show up to vote in remarkable numbers. They account for approximately 43% of our elected representatives. This mirrors global patterns where women's parliamentary representation stands at 27.2% as of early 2025. In this regard, progress has notably stalled since 2017. Across the African continent, women's representation in national parliaments varies significantly by region, with some countries making impressive strides while others lag. During the course of Women's Month, the Electoral Commission will be hosting several events to highlight contemporary issues relating to women's participation in electoral democracy. We will unpack our research and other findings and explore concrete measures to ameliorate the current representation issues. This is our contribution to strengthening the very foundations of our electoral democracy. Within the purview of electoral administration, women represent just over 51% of permanent employees, with the vast majority serving as skilled professionals. Similarly, the organization maintains a judicious balance of representation in senior management. Women accounted for 73% of all election officials in the recent general elections. Impressively, 73% of our presiding and deputy presiding officers were women. This is yet another testament to women's expertise in and leadership in electoral processes. So with this statement, it was just to show that what I have said in my opening remarks, that women are participating more than males in elections. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce our guest today. Amongst us, we have Professor Joleen Steyn-Kotze, seated on the far right. Prof. Steyn-Kotze is a Chief Research Specialist in Democracy and Citizenship in DCES Research Division at the Human Science Research Council. She is also a Research Fellow at the Center for Gender and African Studies at the University of the Free State and a visiting professor in the Faculty of Humanities at Nelson Mandela University. Her academic interests are rooted in democracy theory, focusing on substantive democratization and social-political citizenship. Prof. Steyn-Kotze has written a book on with the title Delivering an Elusive Dream of Democracy. Lessons from Nelson Mandela Bay this book was nominated for the 2020 South African Academy of Science Humanities Book Award. Can we give her a round of applause? And to my right, we have Mr. Bailie. Mr. Bailie has a master's degree in international studies from Rhodes University and certificates in thought leadership for Africa's renewal and transformative governance from Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute, and as well as the University of the Free State, respectively. He has completed several doctorate courses in strategic leadership at the Regent University School of Business and Leadership. Mr. Craig is an alumnus of the Conrad. These words. You are. Yeah, you can hear that word. I don't know. Yeah. So this is the Young African Leaders Initiative, as well as a fellow of the Future Elect South African Public Leadership Program. Craig has more than 10 years of experience as a defense civilian in higher education, lecturing on political science, and has engaged audiences in South Africa and beyond on a wide range of issues, including democracy and civic mindedness. He has given commentary on radio and national television and publishes regularly in the popular press. He is the founding director of the Bailie Leadership Consultancy. And then we have Mr. Mvenene from Walter Sisulu University. He is a lecturer in the Department of Political Studies and is teaching as well as supervising both undergraduate and postgraduate levels with interests rooted in political economy, political theory, public policy analysis, South African and African politics. Mr. Mvenene contributes regularly to national conversations on South African politics through media commentary as well as opinion writing. He's also featured on the SABC, Cape Talk, True FM, just to name a few, Eyewitness News, notwithstanding contributions beyond South African politics, such as those in the Africa Report of Africa. He also contributed to discipline-related public discourse on traditional leadership, youth participation, electoral politics, coalition governance, and African Renaissance through speaking engagements at various institutions. In terms of education, he has a Bachelor of Administration from the Walter Sisulu University on Public Affairs. He also has a Bachelor of Arts Honors in Political Science from the Nelson Mandela University. He has a Master's degree in Arts in Political Studies from Nelson Mandela University. Currently, he is Doctor of Philosophy candidate in Political Studies at Nelson Mandela University. Last but not least, the lady of the moment. This is Ms. Aviwe Kwichi. Mrs. Aviwe Kwichi Mbambo. Sorry. I've known her since varsity days. We went together at University of the Free State. So when she came to the IEC, I was like, hey, I know this girl. But I don't know where I know her from, but I know her. She used to be in the SRC at the university, so I could see her on the posters. So I wrote to her on email and said, hey, where have I seen you before? And then she said, no. No. So, no, she had explained that, no, she went to University of the Free State, and we have a mutual friend. So then our relationship, AV, has been solid since. Yes. Ms. Aviwe Kwichi Mbambo is an electoral project coordinator at the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa, managing the Great Kai local office alone. She holds a master's degree in political science, which she graduated cum laude from the University of Fort Hare. Aviwe has an interest in electoral politics, international relations, and conflict studies. She has extended her views on politics by activity contributing to political literature and published a couple of academic journals in collaboration with the academic scholars such as Professor Breakfast and Dr. Johnson. Thank you. As I was reading and preparing for these bios this morning and last night, I was like, I will be introducing very educated people, and I only have an honors degree. But now I'm doing my second honors degree at Rhodes University, so I was like, why didn't I do my master's? Because now I was going to say I'm also a master's candidate. But I'm privileged and honored to introduce such guests. We are now getting into the gist of our program, where we will unpack our discussion topics. Just to highlight what the speakers will be discussing on is the gender gap as it relates to political participation within youth demographic, and well as we're going to assess the strategies to increase voter turnout amongst youth, as well as potential for e-voting within the political landscape and youth demographic. The IEC, you'll hear from Avi when she unpacks her topic. She'll speak about e-voting, and then we'll see how you guys feature. So you need to ask as many questions as possible. I plead with you. Thank you so much. Without any further ado, may I please call upon Professor Steyn-Kotze to the stand. Thank you.
Good morning. How are you? Are you good? And there's a specific reason I'm asking if you're good, because I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the more silent challenges when we speak of youth participation, gender polarization, youth polarization within elections and the broader body politic. And it's quite an interesting question because very often, noting that we are almost at Sustainable Development Goal 2030. It's not far to go. And noting youth empowerment and gender equality is a key Sustainable Development Goal that the United Nations had committed to reaching in 2015, by 2030. We know that women are generally underrepresented in politics. There is a body of research that demonstrates that. There are countries that have worked very hard and had some successes around facilitating women's political empowerment, countries like Rwanda. And we find other countries like India, for example, where women are still contesting the right to have a percentage of parliamentary seats within parliament. And I think it was in 2023 or 4, very recently, that they had managed to pass a bill that legislates gender parity within the Indian parliament. Women face economic barriers. Youth face economic barriers. Gender norms around youth, how we see women, how we see young women, how we see young people, access to financial resources. Just very briefly, how many of you here have gone after an opportunity only to be told you don't have the experience? But you cannot get the experience until you've had the opportunity, right? So it's kind of this cycle that you go through. And those are norms. When we speak of norms and values, on how women and young people are seen within broader society. We know women face safety and security concerns. Very often as well, even within political structures and political parties and political organizations, globally the evidence demonstrates that women are more likely to experience discrimination, sexual violence, or any other form of exclusion purely based on their gender. Similarly, young people within political organizations as well might experience discrimination because they are seen as not having the correct experience, or possibly being too robust or being too militant in their approaches. Do the policies work? I mean, we have a very broad architecture of gender equality policies, of youth empowerment policies. But the question, of course, is, do those policies work? Do we see on-the-ground benefit around those policies? So institutional challenges around the implementation and enforcement, support for leadership development, for example, are also key issues. And of course, the need for economic empowerment, specifically women's economic empowerment, is quite crucial. So, Noting all of this, there is one conversation we are not having in terms of what the barriers to youth and youth participation in politics is, as well as women's political empowerment and women's political participation. And that is, how happy are you? Are you good? Are you feeling hopeful for the future? Yeah, I'm getting a very not too sure about that one. Are you feeling worried about the future within the next 5 years? Has life gotten better for you over the last 5 years? And do you believe your life will get better within the next 5 years? So those questions that we ask are questions around hopefulness and hopelessness. And it is important because from approximately 2016 globally, so it is not just us South Africans that worry, that are sad, that are angry, that may be disillusioned and feeling like change is not coming. Globally, there has been an increase in worry, sadness, and anger towards institutions, towards politicians, towards promises, for that matter, made. The perception globally is that democracy is no longer equipped to meet public need because we find increasing levels of inequality, tougher economic climates. And tougher economic climates, of course, lead to higher levels of economic dissatisfaction. And, of course, a distrust in political elites. I'm not going to ask how many of you trust your politician. So it does beg questions around democratic quality and the long-term sustainability of democracies. And very often we are not having this conversation. We look at statistics, right? We look at how many people participated in an election versus how many people didn't. How many people could have participated in an election but didn't? We give reasons to say, well, you know, people are dissatisfied, people are unhappy, but we haven't really explored that happiness gap or unhappiness gap and its influence on empowerment and disempowerment. Well-being and happiness studies is very closely linked to how well a society thinks it's doing. And if a society thinks it's doing well, it is more likely to participate in the formal political processes, right? Because if you feel you are doing well, you feel what you are doing is worthwhile, right? And if it's worthwhile, then you would probably do it again. So, let me use a concrete example. I have gone out and voted. Let me put it this way. I am young at heart, but slightly older in other places. So, okay, I have gone out to vote for the first time ever, and right after my vote, a new school was built in my community. I would think that, wow, my vote did that. So the chances of me going out to vote again is probably higher. What would happen if I go out and vote, but nothing changes? Then eventually people become despondent, and I have a thing to flight. There we are. In 2023, that was 2 years ago, we went across the country for our South African Social Attitude Survey. And within that survey, we Our sample, I think, for that year was round about between 3,000 and 4,000, 3,600. The data is nationally weighted to be representative of the South African population. And there's two questions that I thought would be very important for this discussion. What has the country done right since 1994? The bigger the word, the more often that sense popped in within that, or popped up within that question. So freedom, education, people, grants, equality, houses. When we look at what South Africa, and please, I also have to say that I had to remove the word nothing from the data analysis. Because there was also a very deep sense that nothing changed. Everything stayed the same. But in order to get the sense of what the country has done right, there is a focus on our political rights, my freedom of speech, my right to get a house, my right to education, education provision. Concomitantly, when we look what has the country done wrong since 1994, corruption was very, very much within the public imagination, along with unemployment, crime. Some people said everything, which is also why it features quite prominently. But these two graphs, I think, really show us the level of despondency or the words we use to describe when we talk about what has gone right versus what has gone wrong. And I just want you to pay attention. There are more words in what has gone wrong than what there is in what has gone right. And that also says something, right? That the public imagination or the public mood might be one of focusing on the negative as opposed to focusing on the positive. So remember that as we go along. So we went out, and I wanted to know, are you good? Are South Africans good? Yes? No? Who wants to venture a guess? Are we good? No, we're not. So it's a little bit of a mixed picture. Because by 2019, 2020, so that would be pre-pandemic, pandemic years, just over half of the South African population said, you know what? We're good. We are satisfied with our lives. The highest was between 2014 and 2015, where 57% of South Africans said, we are satisfied with our lives. That could be linked to the 20-year democracy celebration, but as we saw subsequently, we just had 30 years of democracy, and less than 50% of South Africans are satisfied with their lives. Only 32% of South Africans were satisfied with how democracy is working, and only 24% were satisfied with how the economy is working. Now, when we start digging a little bit deeper, because we can talk about life satisfaction, and we can talk about how democracy is working, and we can talk about how an economy is working, but we need to look at life satisfaction, the elements that make up life satisfaction. So there we would find, for example, satisfaction with the standard of living, satisfaction with health, life achievement. So are you living your purpose? Do you feel that you are achieving what you were meant to achieve? Safety, your sense of safety. Financial security, big one. Financial security and spirituality and or religion. And when we dig a little bit deeper, women enjoyed lower levels of life satisfaction in all areas except for spirituality, which has brought me to the conclusion that women suffer but we pray as well. Similarly, age also played quite a big role in how hopeful and how satisfied you were with your lives. Subjective well-being was comparatively lower for the age group 19 to 24, And I've got the IEC here. I want to venture a guess that that is the age group you are struggling to get to the polls. So it's a nice conversation to have. The age group 45 to 54 were also comparatively less satisfied, funnily enough. I'm convinced, though, that's because of the possibility of a midlife crisis at that point in time. So specific areas that younger people were dissatisfied with was standards of living, access to health care, life achievement, future financial security. And it's interesting, it's not financial security now, but it is financial security in the future, and spirituality and or religion. So when I looked at all of this, I don't know how much time I have left, but I am wrapping up, I promise. So when I look at all of this, we need to start really looking at how equality of opportunity, which is the lottery of birth, right? How the lottery of birth impacts on a person's equality of opportunity, opportunity to achieve their life's purposes, opportunity to advance and move forward. People cannot control characteristics like biological sex, economic circumstances, geography, even ethnicity for that matter. You cannot control where you were born. That begs the question then, how do we equalize the playing field for a more balanced equality of opportunity? One area, of course, is education. Another area, of course, is empowerment, political empowerment, leadership empowerment, economic empowerment. We had a water outage, it was many, many years ago in Nelson Mandela Bay. And it was for days on end that there wasn't water in certain areas. It took entrepreneurs that stand at the robot to sell us their goods 2 days to start selling jugs that you can carry water in. That's an entrepreneurial spirit that you have there, something to capitalize on. Access to healthcare is important. Access to basic services is also important. There's a very big difference in equality of opportunity of somebody doing homework by candlelight, for example, versus somebody doing homework in a well-lit room in the evenings. So this sense of well-being, of happiness, of satisfaction is a critical element when we start our conversations around what are the barriers and pitfalls to political participation of, for example, youth and women. We know South Africa remains a highly unequal country. We know that there are many, many challenges. From a policy perspective, we need to start understanding the patterns of wellness, the distribution of happiness, because those distributions of happiness will give us a picture into what communities we need to target for political empowerment, economic empowerment, as well as overall political participation. Out of all the groups that we looked at, the demographic that had the highest level of hopelessness were young Black South African females aged 19 to 24. I think I've shocked the room in silence. And I see Sanda's looking at his watch. So let me move on. So when we think of these questions, we do need to look at just basic human development that focuses on human needs. And those needs include self-actualization needs as well as happiness needs. We do need to keep track of the distribution of wellness and happiness to determine what public goods are needed in order to advance equality of opportunity. We know that South Africa's democracy is at a crossroads after 30 years. We do need renewed political trust. We do need higher levels of equality and equal participation. But in order to do that, I think we also do need to look broader than your standard indicators and look more holistically around wellness and happiness, as well as how hopeful or hopeless you may feel about the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. You have highlighted very important issues. Just to ask, are we good? By show of hands, are we good? I'm good. Just to welcome Rhodes University. Here's Rhodes University. Without any further ado, this is Women's Month after all, so I'll call upon Mrs. Mbambo on the stage. Thank you. Over to you, AV.
Right. It is still morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, let me also start by writing on Prof, my fellow colleague, to check if everyone's still good this morning. My part is a little bit different, but relevant to the theme that we have today. I want to talk about electronic voting and how this can contribute towards increasing our voter participation and also all right, okay. So we're going to talk about electronic voting and its possibilities and the opportunities that it brings towards actually increasing voter participation by the youth. We already know that women are already in the forefront, and possibly by our male counterparts, and actually bettering what we have from the women landscape. But the reason why we are trying to engage the public is so that we can find a way forward as the South African electoral management body. Yes, we want to keep up with times, we want to be modern, we want to enhance modernization, and also at the same time we want to increase accuracy. If you remember in the recent elections or the past elections, do you remember how many recounts we had? For the very first time, we had an issue with recounting of ballot papers. Maybe there was a mistrust. As you can see, what Professor has already alluded to, there's a huge issue when it comes to voters and their trust within the democratic institutions. Maybe it could be because of past experiences, or maybe it's a general mistrust based on the kind of a service that they are receiving as the citizens on the ground. So you go to a question whereby everything that is offered by the public sector or the democratic institution is being pre-examined, cross-questioned, and doubted. So, as an electoral commission, we've got a responsibility of conducting research into electoral developments. So this is one of those projects that we are doing to actually bring to the people electoral voting so that we can better manage the elections, but we cannot do that without hearing the perspectives so that we can have a policy that will be suitable and that will match the reality of the South African electoral dynamics. Of course, technology is not new within the public sector. It's not a new phenomenon. We see that many of our government departments are managing their recruitments through online platforms. However, with technology, there's always a big concern. It brings about disadvantages, and sometimes it also has its advantages. So we want to examine those, we want to discuss those and interrogate those so that we can come with ways, or we can come with a method that will be suitable and at most best try to address the disadvantages and the concerns from the public on the ground. Research has been conducted. Discussions have been held already. Recently, there was a conference in Cape Town where various stakeholders were involved and they were part of this discussion to actually present also the various methods that have been adopted on electoral voting from various countries, to check what were the prospects, what were the successes, and what were the challenges that were experienced, and what versus what would best suit South Africa. Remember, in South Africa, we have got an infrastructural issue that needs to support the electoral electronic methods of voting. So if we have a problem with infrastructure, then it means that we must find a device that will suit or actually be able to actually better or actually close the gap that we have when it comes to the infrastructural challenges that we have. For example, we've got electricity cuts. So if we speak about electronic methods of voting, then the first thing that will come to your mind is what happens if we don't have electricity? So what kind of a device must we look for? It's one that's got a battery life that is more sustainable, so that we can be able to manage elections without the issue of having electricity cuts. So those are the debates that are currently underway, and the Electoral Commission has got an open engagement period whereby we want to bring this debate to the public so that we can consider all the inputs from various spaces within the stakeholders, crucial role players, so that we can be able to have a policy that will best suit our problems or best suit our reality as South Africans. So I will quickly just define what is electronic voting, or rather what we call e-voting. E-voting is simply a method that we use to manage elections by using an electronic device. The electronic device can facilitate the actual voting process. It can also assist with the counting process and the determination of the results. So this means that we have real-time management of elections, whereby a voter will cast a vote and immediately, simultaneously, that vote is being allocated to the candidate or the political party. Therefore, this means that the actual voting and the counting are taking place simultaneously. Now, how do we do this? Research has proven that electronic voting has increased voter turnout up to 10% to 15%, more particularly amongst our youth. So you would ask yourself, the traditional method is working. We have never had an election that has been deemed not credible. We've always had a credible election. Why e-voting? Okay, so when we speak of e-voting, you probably want to imagine, where is this e-voting going to take place? There are two forms of e-voting. The first one is the one that you do under an uncontrolled environment. And then the second one will take place under a controlled environment. And what do I mean when I say a controlled environment and an uncontrolled? Well, we don't control how people vote, for starters, but this is just to simply say that we've got voting stations that have been established where ordinarily citizens would visit so that they could be able to cast their ballots. But now in this instance, we are speaking of e-voting. We've got internet. So we've got two options. You've got an option of voting at the comfort of your own home using a device of your choice, which could be a smartphone. So that is where we say that this voting will take place outside of a controlled environment, which would be your normal voting station. Then we have a second form of e-voting, whereby now this voting takes place under a controlled environment, which is our voting stations. Now, this kind of a voting will take place inside the voting station. Now, the first kind of a voting That one raises a lot of questions. And whenever we are conducting research into any project or any policy or any development, whether technological or otherwise, we will always take example to check where did it work and where did it not work, so that we can find the gaps and possibly try to find a system or a method that is going to best suit or match our realities. Now, for example, the online under an uncontrolled environment has worked in Estonia. That is the only country that has used it. And that country has got probably a relatively low population density of up to only 12 million citizens. Now, they also don't have the big problems of corruption, big problems of maladministration, all those things. So that is a kind of let me maybe say, close to a perfect society. So with them, the voting outside of an uncontrolled environment worked for them, and they are still using that kind of method to actually conduct their voting. And then when you look at your bigger population density countries like India, they have used electronic voting, but under a controlled environment. Voting that takes place at the voting station, but using an electronic device. So that is where we are trying to find the method, which electronic device can we best use inside the voting station? Can we adopt the outside of the voting station? And if possible, can we use both? That is the debate and the discussion that is currently underway. So with your kind of a model that you use inside of the voting stations, there are quite a few. As we all know, technology is progressive. So you might have a device today, and then the next country says, wait, hang on, we can use this same concept, but we can have a better feature. We used to have your ordinary Nokia phones back in the days, but now we have got smartphones, but it's still a cell phone. So that is how you will find, even with these different modes of electronic voting devices, you will find that the other probably has the same basic elements as the previous one, but there's a little bit of an advancement. So for the first one, for example, this is your electronic voting machine that is used at the voting station. And then this machine, this is where the voter will come, they will cast their ballot, and it will be in an electronic mode, like your computer or software. There's a different software management for that, where the votes are being calculated and where the voter is casting their vote. Then you have a direct recording equipment. This kind of an equipment is more like your smartphone, where there's a screen where you can select and then you can cast your vote using. But now, there's another one, which is voter verifiable paper audit. This one gives you an option of selecting your option of who you want to vote for, but then it's got another feature in addition to it that gives you a receipt. So you get two receipts. One is for the voter, and then the other one remains at the voting station at the ballot box, whereby the voter will cast their vote using the electronic device, receive a receipt, and then one is for them, and then the other is put in the ballot box. So there are various methods that are used and various options that we have, and now we are going to look at these different methods to check which one would be best suitable for South Africa. So that is the debate that is currently underway, and these are the options that we have. So I just wanted to give you an understanding or a kind of a picture of what are we talking about when we are speaking of these electronic voting devices. Now, of course, we've got advantages when it comes to the issue of electronic voting. There will be increased accessibility, because it means now all voters will have access, whether you are at the comfort of your home or whether you are going to the voting station. Also, at the same time, it means that the mobile cell phones by the voters will be used. However, because now we are increasing accessibility, we must not forget that we also don't want to decrease the credibility of the election. So it means now a lot of voter education must be done so that those that will be voting at the comfort of their own home without having to go to the actual voting station are trained on how to do it correctly. They've got the correct app if it will be used using an application. And then there are concerns on influence. What if someone, a third party, is going to assist the voter? Or what if someone votes on behalf of the voter? Those are the questions and the concerns that come up when we are discussing the issues of voting outside of a controlled environment. And of course, this is a convenient method of voting. And it's flexible. Imagine if you are writing an exam tomorrow, you missed the application to apply for a Section 24, what we normally have during the national and provincial elections. It means that you are not restricted by any voting district boundary. It means that you are not restricted by your geographical area where you will be located at the time. It means that it's convenient and flexible and you'll be able to do it wherever you are at the time. So it's real-time voting. Also, it reduces voter fatigue. Normally, when we have voting, you'll find that people come out and they stand in queues. Sometimes the queues are long. The Electoral Commission does try to invest into strategies to try and manage the queues by having voting centers and streaming during the voting process. But still, when people have a higher interest, they turn out to come in numbers to the voting station, and we cannot run away from the issue of having long queues at the voting station. So if you've got an efficient system that is using an electronic method, it moves away, now we move away from the issue of having human error. We move away from the issue of having tiredness and fatigue by both the voters standing at the queues and even the electoral staff at the voting station. So even the long counting hours, imagine a presiding officer, they will normally work, I would ask myself, how do they do it? They work on special vote day. It depends on the applications that you had in your voting district. It's not up to you as IEC to determine how many special votes this voting station will have. It's up to the applicants or the turnout of the applications. So if you had 500 applications for home visits and all of them were approved, it means you have to manage and conduct 500 home visits. That means you are visiting 500 homes. Now imagine on special vote day, you conduct home visit, first day. Second day, you go and you do again home visits. The third day, when it comes to election, you must be very tired. And when you are going to have an election, you have to prepare from 4 a.m. if you don't want to be late, because the stations are opening at 7 a.m. Now remember, some of the people are working at rural areas. So for you to travel to the voting station, sometimes you have to start at the police station, then go to the voting station. So there's a lot of preparations that go into it. By the time you counting starts at 9 o'clock. By the time you count, you are a little bit tired. So imagine the convenience, imagine the reduced fatigue that this technological innovation will bring for both the voters and those that are managing elections. And at the same time also, we will have faster results and there will be transparency at the same time. When we're speaking of faster results, you will be able to immediately at the voting station generate those results. But now, someone will say, what if there's a third hand there? You know, there's an American scholar that is doing research on electoral management processes. He says in his writings that it's amazing how people easily trust other systems, but when it comes to political issues, there's always contestations and always concerns and there's always mistrust. For example, we all get paid, right? Everyone has a bank account, right, in the room? We all do. And when someone or the place where you work for, they deposit money into your bank account and you withdraw 300 rands, if you had 1,000 rand, then you assume you'll have 700 rands left without having any doubt, but you don't even see the ATM, you don't even see the third hand, you don't know who is administering the transaction. But when it comes to election issues, why do we have a mistrust? You see? So that's the irony to it, but at the same time, does not take away the fact that the views of the public and the points and the concerns of the public are validated, and they must be considered whenever we are going to be doing policy. Then also, the disadvantages we've already spoken about. There is a digital divide that we cannot neglect, that we cannot overlook. You find that in some areas, people, yes, do have access to cell phones, some of them smartphones, but some of them still use our old type of a cell phone. Now, with that being the reality of South Africa, then we need to consider what is the best suitable method, because yes, there is a digital divide. And you can be very surprised. We were holding by-elections in Ngushwa, I think 2 months ago, or 3 months ago, I can't remember. But recently, during this financial year, we had by-elections that were conducted. And there was a rural location that where we were actually facilitating home visits, where we were conducting voting at each homestead. And in some of these areas, you would find that, I was really shocked, I was surprised that you still have homes like that, but it's the reality of South Africa. You would find that for someone to have access to a cell phone, they still rely on a particular somebody within the rural area. Not all of them have access. And I was so shocked, even my grandmother has, but it's a reality of our current economic divide, that these are the issues on the ground, and those need to be considered so that we can be having an inclusive and a truly accessible system. If we're going to speak about accessibility, then it must include all members of the society. Also, we want to check our disability group. We have our disability community. How best can we also make sure that they are also included and we don't move away and not consider them? And fortunately, in the document that was produced by the Electoral Commission after the vigorous consultations with our stakeholders, even the disability unit was a part of that conference, and they also contributed. So, if we are going to be speaking to disability, this unit, this electronic device, how is it going to cater for the blind? How is it going to cater for those that have an audio impairment? All those things need to be considered, and we must consider all these things so that we can have a suitable and a best fit device for South Africa. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, there's a lot of opportunities that will be brought by technological advancement. And with that being said, we are not overlooking the disadvantages, but the benefits of it are more progressive, and the benefits are more conducive even for electoral management and democratization, for us to actually see ourselves moving forward with the world, modernizing. We need to be realistic to what we currently have, what is currently working for us, and what might not work for us. So this is a discussion that is open for us to interrogate. I will not speak further. I don't have more to speak on the issue, but I wanted to present electronic voting and the different methods that we have, and also speak of where we are as a country so that we can have successful and meaningful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, AV. Just to highlight, so that we don't have confusion when next year niti sizovote endlini. We're not voting electronically next year. We're not voting electronically next year. I'm not sure about 2029, but these are just, as AV has alluded to, these are just talks that we are having with the general public just to see if electronic voting is feasible. And then we'll submit our findings to Parliament and deliberate more. And also, these engagements zizosincedisa into gauging the feasibility of e-voting. And also bear in mind that we can't, as the IEC, commit to e-voting if the young people are not going to register, and we're still seeing low numbers in terms of registration and voter participation, because this e-voting facility will be made possibly for advantage for the youth, so that they can be able to vote in the comfort of their homes. Because when it comes to the voting day on a Wednesday, it's a public holiday. The youth goes and does what the youth does best. So we want to change that narrative, so that if someone come voting day, we vote in our beds and then we enter them in the streets. Now we are going to introduce or ask Mr. Mvenene, ngenimbiza ngesiduko ke, if Ben Maz. But yeah, we want kumbuza when I still had dreadlocks. Okay. Yes, I think they would be very, not that, they'd be very bigger than his. I had mine from after coming from the mountains in 2006. I thought, let me have these dreadlocks as a fashion, but then decided to cut them as I enter the corporate space, so that, but without any further ado, come along, Mhlekazi, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Sander, for that. And so I've already been introduced. So just for clarity, isiduko sami ndinguSikhomo Rhudulu Changisa. Yeah. So hopefully next time, Mhlekazi. Yeah. So the two colleagues have already spoken brilliantly about e-voting. Prof has also shared her views. So mainly, I will be looking at factors that contribute to a lack of participation amongst ourselves as young people. So first and foremost, I think I'm still within the category of young people, right? So I'm speaking about myself, right? And I'm speaking to other young people. I'm not exempting those who are not within this category of young people. So my approach is this one. I think as young people, we must take control. I think we must take charge, right? Yes, there are challenges, right? They've been mentioned, socioeconomic, this and that. We also face challenges within, for instance, political parties. Those who have been part of political parties know what these challenges are, right? And hence we speak of this underrepresentation of young people within, political structures, within the content of party policies, and within the policies of government, right? So one who has been in those spaces may be aware, but my approach is that let us try to take charge. Let us take control, keeping in mind that we have a huge advantage. Numerically, we are dominant as the youth, as a demographic, right? I believe we make up around 60-something% of the population in South Africa. And therefore, if we are numerically dominant, all we need is solidarity in our organization. So if, for instance, and I'm not saying that we must be violent or anything like that, but if you look at, for instance, the hashtag Fees Must Fall moment in South Africa, right? So at that moment, you saw, for instance, WhatsApp groups where you'd have people from all 26 universities and all TVETs within the country. You saw people engaging daily on how they would organize in all university campuses and TVET campuses in the country. So with that kind of organization, with that kind of solidarity, right, we were able to achieve a lot. Today, for instance, we don't have what we envisioned, this decolonized curriculum and so on and so forth, but NSFAS today is a grant. So Gen Z, I believe, doesn't have to pay back their tuition at university. And so that is a win. So we need to convert that. We need to convert that organization, that solidarity, into ballot power. Because we can, for instance, as young people, go to social media, ventilate, express frustration. We can have hashtags. We can create trending topics on social media to a point where they even influence mainstream news. Now some news channels will have a segment on what's trending on social media, right? So we can have that influence. But in terms of electoral democracy, what really matters is what decisions we make at the ballot, not staging protests at voting stations, not creating trends on social media or venting on social media, or, for instance, thinking that my vote changes nothing. Nothing will change. Or to say, maragafana, it's all the same, right? I know young people who've never voted in their lives, but they believe strongly that nothing will change. Whether I vote or not, it doesn't make a difference. And my argument is always that, let's look at the city of Johannesburg. There's one party there, I think it's a 1-2% party, but it was able to have its councillors become mayor 2 consecutive times. And that's a 1-2% party in that particular municipality. That's evidence that a 1-2% change can result in something changing. Now we have, for instance, after last year's election, we no longer have a majoritarian parliamentary arrangement. Right? So now no party can govern on its own. That reality is because people use their power at the ballot, not because they expressed frustration on social media, not because they looked at their socioeconomic problems or that they had protests, but it's an outcome of the use of ballot power. And I think as South Africans, we are relatively privileged. You know, I'm not in any way cheerleading for the IEC, but the IEC enjoys relative trust and confidence in comparison to other parts of the continent. And I think we can see that in, for instance, last year's election. And I think even if there is a trust deficit, but our trust deficit is within government. It's not within the elections management body itself. And so, as the colleague has presented here, we can clearly see that there are changes to further engage young people. So I have my notes here, so I keep referring to them. And so I think what I must also mention is that as young people, we are actually concerned about the effectiveness of democracy. So I read an Afrobarometer survey, right, that showed that young people, mainly those who didn't experience apartheid, right, young people would choose to have an authoritarian government that provides jobs, that provides housing, and that creates development. So young people are willing to forego the right to vote in exchange for a government that delivers. This is, you can look this up. I think it's a 2018 Afrobarometer survey. And so I believe that as young people, as Gen Z or as AMA 2K, I think the primary concern for younger people is the effectiveness of democracy. In other words, can democracy deliver? Can this democracy of ours translate into food on the table? Can it translate to sustainable employment? Can it translate to more opportunities, right? So we are people who want to see material benefit from our democracy. Hence, there are now arguments that, look at China. They've had one party there in power for a number of years, yet their Human Development Index far surpasses us as a democratically free or politically independent people. So I think for us to see that happen, we need to act as a unified or as an organized grouping as young people. And I think this then takes me to what the colleagues here characterized as political acclimatization, right, and turnout strategies. So I think this concept, to just simplify it, it means that, or it asks the question, how do we transform or convert young people into political animals, right? And so I view myself as a political animal. My life is literally politics. Whether I'm at home, I'm at work, on my way to work, back from work, I'm always engaged in some kind of political activity. Or I'm trying to remain politically competent. I'm trying to remain on top of the issues. Right? I want to track policy implementation. I want to know what's happening in South Africa, what's happening outside South Africa, to a point where even in my lecture rooms, I compel my students to register to vote, right? And I encourage them that those who want to be involved in political work should do so. That is not some kind of a badge of shame, where now there's the perception that political activism has this kind of a negative, connection to it. And so, who are the people who are responsible for activating young people or making them political animals? And I think everyone in this room has that responsibility. Right? Whether you are at a university, whether you're a consultant, whether you work for a government entity, whether you're in civil society, I believe we all hold that responsibility. And so don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we should become politicians, right? I'm saying we must become politically competent, right? Not become politicians, right? And I think as young people, myself included, we need to use our spheres of influence. We have to work with, for instance, the IEC, that, by the way, has a lot of useful resources. I believe that many colleagues in academia actually use the IEC's resources for their research, right? That is easily and freely available. And I mean, there's a lot going on there on that website, and I think we must be the ambassadors of activating people for them to understand the power of their vote. Because in most instances, there aren't people to activate, there aren't people to inspire. We tend to view that that is the job of a particular entity. We tend to outsource that responsibility. And I think we must always think of insourcing responsibility in whatever space you are. If you're, for instance, a student in any of our universities, it is your responsibility to actually engage those within your sphere of influence and to let them know about the importance of active participation in politics. And so here I have, there's a lot of strategies to increase voter turnout. There was also an engagement similar to this one, where young people, students, were sharing their views in terms of what they think can be done to increase turnout in elections. So there was one proposal, right? There was one proposal on the extra administration of registering to vote. So there was talk, right, of e-voting or remote internet voting. So if you go to universities, we already vote on our cell phones. Whether you're voting for SRC elections, whether you're voting for something, the convocation, you vote on your phone. You get all of that information wherever you are, right? And you don't have to register. If you're a student at Mandela, you don't register to vote in the SRC elections. By virtue of being a registered student, automatically you can vote. And I think that's something that, from my perspective at least, does make sense. Of course, colleagues raised concerns about the POPIA Act and so on and so forth. But I think young people really want convenience. Let's always keep in mind that some of us who are a bit older, right, 90s children, 80s children, right, we are more or less digital migrants, right? We weren't born with smartphones or tablets, right? We learned this maybe in high school or at university. So these kids were actually born in a world where they had tablets, they had cell phones, right? They had all manner of efficiencies. Today you can, for instance, get food at home. It comes to you, grocery, fast food, even what the colleague said young people enjoy doing the most, right? You can get all of those things in the comfort of your home. And so the center here should be convenience. And I think any kind of strategy should make central convenience. And some of these ways of increasing turnout really require money. And this is where I find, difficulty, because repeatedly we see cuts to the IEC's budget. And so we must ask ourselves that as young people, if we continue to make these demands, we want A, B, C, D, E, F, and yet our representatives in Parliament are defunding that very same institution, continuously cutting its budget. How will all of these A, B, C, Ds, and E's materialize if the funding for this institution is continuously cut? And so I think there were other ways here to increase turnout. I think some of the colleagues have mentioned them. But I think more than anything, the responsibility still remains largely with us as young people. We can come to this engagement and come and mandate the IEC and give them a long bucket list of things to do for us to actually turn out at elections. But if we don't take control, if we don't become the center, nothing will really change. For instance, at Mandela, when we first had this remote internet voting, we thought that there'd be high turnout. But surprisingly, comrades or parties were struggling to even get the constitutional threshold of students to vote. So I think at that time it was 25%, and there was a struggle to meet that threshold. So my point here is that no one strategy is a silver bullet, right? What I think here is central is the active involvement of young people. It is young people taking control and becoming the center of engaging our peers to form part of this process of being engaged in our own democracy. Thank you so much.
Sibulele Khudulu. Ugogo wam, mama kamama wayenguManxuba, uKhudulu, ubhodla inyama. So ke ngumtshana. Umtshana ke has highlighted very important points on his presentation. about young people being effectors of democracy. And then he also highlighted that we saw that with the rise of EGNU, we saw even those people that had questions about IEC having to, that they think that there's only this one party that keeps getting the majority, but these elections proved that when you go out in numbers to vote and you show your dissatisfaction through the ballot, there can be change that has been done. So EGNU is effect to that. Just on a lighter note, when I entered the IEC, I have a family in politics. I have a brother who is in parliament, Ubaxolile for DA. So I was like, this will affect umsebenzi wami. How am I going to explain this, that I have a brother who is in parliament and he's the only one that I know who's an Odada who is in parliament. So now I go to Forte University. They had a seminar that I was there as a speaker. I get to meet another brother of mine who is in the EFF, and I was like, oh, thank you. At least now the eye cannot be on me now. Then they say I'm affiliated to a certain political party. What about my brother there in the EFF? So there's sort of like a balance, and I play the mediator in there. We would like to call upon our last speaker, Mr. Craig Bailie, to deliberate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sander. I really like that word, deliberate. I look forward to deliberating with all of you during the Q&A. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I always try to be as deliberate as possible when it comes to greeting groups of people. So in addition to referring to you all as ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you are, let me also say good morning to my fellow Africans, my fellow South Africans, my fellow citizens, and I think more importantly than that, my fellow active citizens. And I hope it's safe to assume that if you're seated here this morning attending this event, that you're being active. And if you haven't been active in politics, well, I hope that this morning will be the start of that journey. And I'm going to ride a bit on the coattails of the people who spoke before me, highly qualified, experienced colleagues. Starting with this, Mr. Mvenene, hopefully soon to be Dr. Mvenene, spoke about political animals. So let me also say good morning, my fellow political animals. Now, in the event that, or by chance, any of you feel offended by that greeting, let me give you this warning or make this statement. If we deny, to the degree that we deny we are political animals, we deny our humanity. Because to be human is to be political. That's a very loaded or packed statement, and I don't think we have the time this morning really to unpack it. As I aspire to be a good leader, as I speak to all of you this morning, let me say that I believe to be an effective leader, one has to ask the right questions. So one of the questions we could ask is, well, what does it mean to be a political animal? And secondly, why is it so important to our identities as human beings? And keep in mind that identity, human, transcends our identity as citizens, South Africans, Africans, political affiliations, etc. So the way I see my job this morning, as I said, as I aspire to be a good leader, is to ask a few questions. And I believe effective leaders know how to ask the right questions. Now, what do I mean by the right question? I think the right question, or a right question, is a necessary question. And a necessary question is a question that, in the space and time in which it is asked, it helps the recipients of the question to better understand why the world is the way it is. And I'm not going to promise to answer all the questions I ask, because this isn't the job necessarily of an effective leader, or, as many of my colleagues are, effective teachers or lecturers. But it's for you to come up with the answers as we deliberate, as we engage in dialogue together, not just this morning, but hopefully also in the seasons to come. Professor Steyn-Kotze asked, for example, are you happy? And some questions that could follow on from this. What do others think of you? Now, I've missed a step here. Let me just backtrack very quickly, if I may. Unlike Mr. Mvenene, and for the sake of transparency and honesty, I'm no longer a youth. I was born in 1983, and I've realized I'm getting older because when I do the math, I can no longer remember how old I am. I have to do the math to come up with my age. So I think that makes me 42. And so I hope this morning you don't hear me speaking at you, for those of you who are still part of that, 15 to 35 category, but that you hear me speaking with you, including as I ask these questions that I believe to be pertinent or important to us as South Africans. So as I was saying, are you happy? What do others think of you? Potentially more important than that question, what do you think of yourselves? This is not a question I was asking as a university student just down the road in what used to be called Grahamstown. And yet I came from a privileged background. I grew up in a middle-class home, attended a former Model C school. I had all of these, I call them blessings, these facilities, these opportunities at my disposal. And yet I wasn't asking these sorts of questions. Do you value others? And I think more important than the question, are you happy? Do you value yourselves? Now, what on earth does this have to do with voter behavior or voter turnout or civic education? I believe one can only live a purposeful life day in and day out to the degree that one values oneself. If I don't value myself, how willing and prepared am I to get up in the morning and give the day all that I can? How willing am I to go and vote if I don't appreciate that because of my value, I need to strive for justice and the kind of order in a country that is inclusive, fair, that generates or encourages prosperity and helps people or citizens realize their potential. A few other questions I'd like to raise, and I may give more attention to them in the allotted time. What is it, and I'll probably spend most of my time on this question, but what is getting in the way of youth, I'm going to be intentional with my words, formal political engagement, specifically voting? And I know a lot has been said, rightly so, about women political participation. What is getting in the way of youth getting out there and voting? So I'll say something about that. Perhaps a controversial question to ask, given my gender, given my skin tone or color tone. Do we want a gender quota? I'm happy to say more about that in a moment. Following on from what Professor Steyn-Kotze shared earlier, I did say it's a controversial question. Why is black women between 19 and 24 the demographic that is most hopeless in South Africa? I heard mention being made of the clergy as we were all introduced to one another. I'm happy to hear that. I'm going to call it the church is represented here. Being a member of the church, one of the questions I have is, what is the role, yes, absolutely, for civil society broadly, but specifically within that, what is the role of the church? In a country, in a continent as religious as Africa. Clergymen or women who are here, please ponder on that question. I look forward to engaging you later on. What do we mean by decolonization? I recently attended a program where the word revolution kept getting thrown around, but no one defined it. And it's very important that we define and understand the words that we use, because words are weapons. And this is my last question before I come back to what's getting in the way of youth formal political engagement. Before I get to that question, I don't want to miss this one. Do we want democracy? And lastly, related to this, how sustainable is a dictatorship or an authoritarian regime? I'm very quickly going to answer that question. It becomes unsustainable as soon as the first person is shot by a security official for getting drunk after 9 in the evening. Immediately it becomes unsustainable, because a life has been carelessly and unjustly lost. I hope you hear the spirit with which I'm speaking here. This is a spirit, forgive me, I can't remember the scholar's name, an American scholar, who talks about the spirit of democracy. So let me get back to this question. I prepared a few notes this morning. I don't know if Mr. Mvenene, like me, was still researching this morning in preparation for this morning's dialogue. But perhaps just a few notes, and forgive me for doing some reading as I share quotes from the important work done by different civil society organizations, think tanks, and also the IEC. What is getting in the way of youth formal political engagement in South Africa? Thank you. Education. The all-important activity. I think that largely helps shape family culture, organizational culture, political party culture, indeed national culture. And I'll say more about culture later on. Just note, no one has spoken about culture yet. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I'll say more about later. But education. While youth are more educated than middle-aged and older citizens, they are also more likely to be unemployed. This is speaking about South African youth. The question I have is, but how educated are the middle-aged citizens and the older South Africans? Because that's the reference point. They're being posted here as the benchmark. The other important thing to consider is, fine, if youth are the most educated, what is the quality of this education? Are we talking about an education that is under the governance of political leaders who desire what's best for their fellow citizens? If we answer no to that question, then education becomes more of a, if I may put it in these terms, sabotage tactic. Okay, so youth are the most educated but still most likely to be unemployed. Clearly a disconnect there, and we have to ask what is the, earlier on someone spoke about the entrepreneurial spirit. Ironically, that arose during COVID at desperate times in Kadeja. To what degree, and forgive me IEC, I don't want to get partisan here, but we have to talk about governance, right? To what degree does government X create an environment in which the entrepreneurial spirit can thrive, where the youth, who are supposedly the most educated, can actually find jobs, can create jobs, can employ people? Unemployment. So just a few points here. I'm answering what's getting in the way, but I'm also just bringing everyone's attention to, let's call it the status of you, the youth, in South Africa. Unemployment among 15 to 34-year-olds rose to 46.5% in the first quarter of 2023, compared to the national average of 32.9%. So this raises questions of access when it comes to voting. Do youth have access to spaces like this one? And not wanting to sound patronizing, I hope you all realize that compared to others your age, in this moment you are privileged to access this space. I'm privileged to be standing here behind a microphone. The people watching online are privileged. They have access to the facilities by which they can hear us speaking to one another. So, to what degree do youth have access to space? To what degree do youth have access to technology? And the more they have access, the greater the chances of education thriving, if we assume that the content being taught is life-giving. I'm just reminded of you where you spoke about cell phones in villages. Let's say 1 or 2 cell phones per village. It's a question of access. How do we change this when the youth unemployment rate is so high? Professor Steyn-Kotze asked, are our policies working? Poverty. According to the Youth Multidimensional Poverty Index Report 2016, about 33.4% of young people in South Africa were multidimensionally poor. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's experiencing poverty across different dimensions, simply put. So the question is, people experiencing this, what is their, how motivated, they've got incentive to vote, absolutely. But do they recognize it? Are they motivated to go and vote, given their circumstances? Or, as we heard specifically concerning black females between 19 to 24, have they lost hope? Something I'm very passionate about, this is how I read it in the internet, or as scholars write, this phrase called household leadership. One of the reasons I'm passionate about it is a president can only lead a country effectively to the degree that he or she can lead his or her household effectively. It's quite simple logic. Let's start small. And if we're successful, we know we can move to the next level. But what I really want to ask is, what percentage of South Africa's youth are leading households? I had to ask my wife, how old was I when we got married? Because I believe a 35-year-old, a 21-year-old who's mature can lead a household. But it really becomes challenging for a 15 to 18 or 19-year-old, just because of age, nothing else. Has that youth had enough time in life to build up the capacity to raise children? And if a youth is leading a household, How much bandwidth does that person have to care about voting? Or are they fighting so hard to survive, to find the next meal, to discipline their siblings? It might be the older generation looking after or leading that household. Let's say 70s and up. But given that generation's historical context, how motivated are they to get the eligible voters in that space to go and vote? What about comfort? Nyasha Himpani, whom I only connected with yesterday, at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation in Cape Town. Please go and read this piece published last Friday in the Mail and Guardian. I think it's entitled The Politics of the Bailie. He writes, across more than 35 African countries, Afrobarometer finds that people living with high poverty, meaning they frequently go without food, clean water, or medical care, are not politically passive. The inverse is also true. The more comfortable you are, the less likely you want to go to the polling station to cast your vote. Going back to my previous point about people living in poverty not being politically passive, I think this is wonderful, but the question is, what does their political action look like? Because in this article, the author was explaining that a lot of these people in poverty-stricken areas, he was speaking specifically about his experience in Zambia, where individual politicians are increasingly finding that members of their constituencies are coming to them to pay for funerals, medical bills, and all sorts of other expenses, because the state is failing in its duties. How do you, the youth, and your peers across the country view leadership, specifically political leadership, in our country? Like their elders, youth are overwhelmingly critical of the government's efforts on job creation, crime, electricity, and corruption, and few approve of the performance of their elected officials. When I read this, I'm thinking, but surely this is more incentive to go and vote. Yet, the hope factor, it's hopeless, so I'm not going to vote because I don't trust the system and I don't trust the political leaders, whether it's the ruling party, whoever that may be, or the opposition parties. So all of these factors, these, let's call them inhibitors, these hurdles that I've tried to identify in understanding the lack of youth formal political engagement in South Africa, all of these factors and questions shape something I alluded to earlier on, and that's the culture we live in. Now, a former or late management consultant and leadership expert, Peter Drucker, is wrongly cited as the source of the following quote. I don't know who came up with the quote, but it's an important one. He didn't say this, but someone said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Put differently, we can have an excellent plan to get as a country from point A to B. And by excellent plan, I mean is the right steps we need to take, let's say, to get to a point where 90% of eligible voters are actually voting. But if we don't have the underlying culture that encourages people to walk through those steps, the strategy doesn't matter. Now, in 1994, when I was in what I called Standard 3, I think that's what grade 5 today, South Africa could not have had a democratic culture. It was simply impossible because of the preceding years, preceding decades. Clearly, apartheid wasn't democratic. So if at our transition we didn't have a democratic culture, the question that must be asked is, to what degree has the post-1994 dispensation encouraged a democratic culture? And forgive me if I cause any offense, but I think the answer to that question is very little. As admirable and noble as the IEC's work is, it's not enough. And that's not the IEC's fault necessarily. Because the IEC is only one among several actors in any country responsible for cultivating a democratic culture. It begins with those household leaders we spoke about, school teachers, civil society broadly, but including also local churches. And the reason I'm comfortable to talk about local churches is because I myself am part of that, let's call it, to use a very political term, establishment. And I found talking about politics in that space quite difficult. Because, and this might be true of the youth broadly, including the youth in churches, that politics is dirty business. And so, as Christians, we need to stay away. Absolutely, politics is a dirty business. All the more reason to get involved. So I feel like I might have gone, I don't know if I've gone over 10 minutes. I feel like I need to land this plane. So when I talk about culture, the phrase political acclimatization, that was in the brief we were given, right? And someone mentioned it earlier on. To what degree are South Africans, this morning specifically the youth, politically acclimatized? To what extent have we been exposed to teachings, to behavioral examples that encourage a culture of democracy? And, you know, in the interest again of transparency and honesty, I get quite irritable or irritated when I hear the phrase or read the phrase, youth don't believe democracy works. And I'm trying to remind myself, I don't want to come across as though I'm speaking at you, those of you who happen to be part of that 15 to 35 age category. We need to be careful to not confuse free and fair elections with electing democratic leaders. We can have free and fair elections. They are fundamentally important to realizing democracy. But if we don't elect virtuous and effective leaders who believe in democracy, those democratic elections will not result in democracy. And so I get concerned when I hear youth saying democracy doesn't work. Do we have democracy in the first place? This is the question I asked earlier on. And we cannot have democracy if we don't have democratic leaders. And I'm certainly not going to stand here and tell you who to vote for, but you have to think about it. What does a democratic leader look like? I hope that I've given everyone some food for thought. Maybe just one more thing, and it's something I skipped. I should have said it earlier on. It's part of the answer to the question, what's getting in the way of formal youth political engagement in South Africa? And our MC, I think you spoke about youth voting from the comfort of their own homes. And I'll finish with this. I'm going to speak more broadly beyond the youth. How many South Africans are comfortable at home? That's not a critique. I'm using that phrase as a, I guess, something to grab hold of. Like I said, we have to ask these questions to help us understand why the world is the way it is, why South Africa is the way it is. But if I'm not comfortable at home, there's a good chance I'm not going to vote. I quickly had to look at the record here. The first opportunity I had to vote was in 2004. I was a third-year university student. It was my second year of politics. I didn't know what I was doing. If this is true I've already shared some of my background with you. A third-year student, second-year politics. I don't want to tell you who I voted for. I'm embarrassed. But all due respect to my parents, I didn't receive civic education at home. And this brings us back to the point about comfort, right? How many young girls or boys fear the moment their dads come home late at night? How many wives fear their husbands returning home late at night? These are not spaces that cultivate democratic culture, unless the youth that come out of those homes, like me, experience some kind of intervention. And so I think the point I'm making there, aside from this issue of comfort, is how many role players or actors are there in South Africa that are working hard to create this democratic culture? I have something to say about this idea of youth taking charge. I often joke with my son, Caleb, who's younger than his sister. I jokingly say, Caleb, take charge of your sister, which she obviously doesn't like. But it's very interesting what happens. He starts behaving in a very physical way, not towards her, but in that space. And I'm careful to say to him, Caleb, taking charge is not about exerting force. It's about exercising leadership. So for what that's worth, I think I'm going to end there. I really appreciate the opportunity and I look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you, sir. We are now getting into our Q&A session. I see people with notebooks and pens. So I am hoping that we'll have good questions to ask. Just as a reminder, in case you have forgotten, our speakers alluded on several issues and that I think we'll just have to highlight so that to lead the questions. We heard about whether we want to have a renewed political trust. Are we still good though? Yes. We heard about wellness, equality, and opportunities, as well as Prof. Steyn-Kotze touched on gender and the quality of life. Also, AV spoke on e-voting and the feasibility of e-voting. Khudulu spoke on the importance of democracy and the importance of knowing about or being informed about politics. And then the last speaker, Mr. Craig, spoke about a lot. But my take there is what is getting in the way of us, both in the youth and Alage, but I'll still say us, in the way of us voting. He touched on issues of unemployment, comfort, the spirit of democracy, whether is it revived or does it need to be revived. Spoke about culture, education as barriers that maybe hinder youth going to the polls. So now I would like my colleagues to assist with roving mics, and I would like to see, thank you, sir. Never mind, colleagues. And then I would like to see some hands, so we can take the first round of hands. Number one. number 2 at the back, number 3. Oh, there's that EFF guy that I was talking about. That big guy there. He's the president of the EFF at Forte. He's my brother. He's number 4. Do you have a fifth hand? Yes. That will be the first round of questions. We take 5 hands in that order, and then we take the second round. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Not that. My name is Sabelos Kosana from the University of Forte, under the Faculty of Social Science and Humanities. I want to first commend the IEC to call this gathering so that we can strengthen our mind and make a contribution about the transformation of this country. I want to embark on a question that was raised by Mrs. Steyn about how did the democracy contributed either corruption, free education. Actually wanted to ask whether it contributed positively or negatively. What I would say about the democracy is that our era from apartheid to democracy, it was not a radical transformation, but the rearrangement of the system. Therefore, we arranged the system into a neoliberal system that had strived to enrich the elites. What I'm trying to say is that what the democracy has contributed 100% and that I would say 100% is to enrich the elites, which Frantz Fanon called them the national bourgeoisie, that now have turned themselves to be the defender of the status quo. So you can't be led by someone who's now benefiting from the status quo, being led by that person for the transformation. That will be illusionary about it. So we're in a system that is an economic system that is driven by the capital-intensive sectors, which doesn't benefit the masses of the people, but the few individuals, actually. And another thing is that Mr. Veneni have raised the question of how the youth, whether the youth they don't want to participate in the electoral voting process. I would answer that as Karl Marx says that a man make his own history make a history not under his own choosing, but the determination of the material condition of that particular time. I want to reference on we make an example about the generation of fees must fall. So now things has changed, the material condition has changed. We would never be radical like the generation of fees must fall. Those institutions has already created the system, the laws to defend itself from the radicalism. So now it needs to be challenged intellectually so. So, of course, the gains of the little privilege that we have gained from this democracy has deceived us to could think that we've reached the point of transformation, most particularly on the youth. And another thing is, of course, the truth that we have lacked the confidence to the leadership that we have now, because it so far has never demonstrated a political will of transformation. The reason I've outlined is that you can't make a leader for someone who's benefiting from the status quo to lead the transformation. You would never do that. And another thing that I want to touch on is this thing of electoral voting process in voting online. I think Mrs. Mbambo, we are going to have a problem if we are going to rush into. Actually, we want us to catch up with Western procedurals, particularly when it's come to the digitals. Reality of the matter lately is that in the previous election, I served as a party agent. So I was able to see the incompetence of the IEC, able to identify the incompetence of the IEC. That raises a question that cannot be easily ignored. Number one, we had an issue where I was a party agent at City Hall. Many of the students were voting there. Many of them, they couldn't vote just because we're not appearing on the list, but they've registered to vote. They can able to produce a proof that here's the proof that we have registered to vote, but they were denied to vote. We have the technical clutches. We saw the screen collapsed there. You have raised the question of lack of accessibility of cell phones in rural areas. So if we would say that we are going to rush now to while we are still having the national digital crisis, again in the issue of data is it's too expensive, data. So there are people that were not able to afford the data for that particular period of moment so that they can able to vote. That might undermine the public confidence of our democracy.
Thank you. Ufuna uzigqiba zonke lo pra. Yeah, we can have number 2.
1, 2. Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me first introduce myself. I go by the name Vuyisa Pikashe. I'm currently doing my studies of law at the University of Fort Hare. Mine is very short in as much as I came here prepared for discussions, but however, along the line, I had picked up some few questions that I would like to first pose to the first speaker, Professor. Yeah. The first question that I want to raise pertains to the sustainable development that you've touched on. So what I want to understand about it, okay, I want to first touch on the 30-year democracy that we have right now. We've seen that there are no changes. Instead, the issues are emanating. So I just want to ask, since you have touched on the aspect of sustainable development, what are the key pointers that can ascertain us to be sure that we can be faithful that there is indeed a change that is going to happen towards this 2030 sustainable development? And then going to the discussions that I have prepared myself, which I want the IEC wants to take into account. First is the women's participation. So I want to highlight on the historical development of the new constitution, new dispensation of democracy that we have in South Africa. So you would see that most activists or most people who were involved into that transformative process were mostly men. So I think this another reason that fosters the little participation of women that we find into the political space. Secondly, I have noted the oversaturation of political spaces. I stated about the men. If we can take a look to those Mama Winnie who had to, Mama Winnie, like Mama Winnie and Goyi, who had to adopt this masculine power in order for them to find the expression to express themselves into this political space. And then going to the youth, I want to touch on the aspect of us being undervalued in circumstances where there are posts that becomes available. So the most issue that becomes a concern is the experience. So that really discourages the youth in terms of being involved because they know that the essential requirement that will be posed to them is their experience. So these are just a few takeaways that I wanted to raise into the IEC. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, panel. Okay, no, thank you to our panelists and thank you to the program director. The panelists are very educated. I'm very nervous. Yeah, no, my name is Kumani Jack. I'm a student activist at the University of Water. I've served in the SRC there, so some of these things that are politically related are an area of interest to me. I'm a law student, I must emphasize, but I'm a person of politics. Yeah. So the first thing that I want to do, the first comment I want to make is in relation to the fact that we see the youth not participating in voting. But the problem is that we want to find solutions that will say, no, young people are not participating in voting because they don't want to go to the voting stations, of which that's not true. Because us saying that, it's being tone deaf, if I can put it like that. Because the youth are not participating in politics because they're not participating in elections because Democrats are not bringing them anything from this point of view now. What do I mean by that? Why people... even in youth and Allah, by the way, there are some that have been voting ever since Babana 18, Klambi or 19, whatever. But now what happens is that still, there is nothing that is happening with their lives because transition of democracy does not translate to economic opportunities for them. Thus, there is no need for them to participate in electoral politics. So if us were going to say that, I know we want to bring them to voting stations, still they're not going to vote. Because for them, the issue is not whether the voting station is far, but whether engaging in this process is going to bear any fruits for me. So that's the first comment that I wanted to make. Then secondly, the approach of saying that, no, since there are these issues of people not participating in politics, we'll just try to maneuver with bourgeois pragmatism that, no, let's make an online electoral process going to fix the problem, is also dishonest. I think that we're trying to find shortcuts to much bigger problems. So it's not going to help us. We can even try to do it. It's not going to be efficient in any way. Because I can tell you now, you will do that. Even the government can say we're going to supply you data for that entire day. Tina, we're going to watch YouTube videos and not participate in that particular process. So then another mistake that I think we're making is that we want to entrust or to give the responsibility of fixing much larger societal issues to IEC, an entity that is supposed to be a regulatory body, if I can put it like that. Now, we have established that the youth is not participating in electoral politics because of the lack of socio-economic opportunities. Now you want IEC to bridge that gap, but you have not given IEC those resources. It's not their sole responsibility of existing that they must bridge this gap between these two social ills or social institutions in society. I don't know if I'm making sense now. Yes, thank you. Yes, now then, Mr. Venen, sorry. Yeah, spoke of something very important that it's important that we know politics. We educate the youth about politics because we as the youth are the people that are going to drive forward change in society. I completely agree. But what kind of politics, what kind of knowledge is the youth going to be consuming that we want them to consume? Because we can say let's consume knowledge, but we're going to consume Western liberal knowledge that is not going to assist us. That is going to teach us participating in politics is wrong. As what the great panelist said, that politics is a dirty game. So if ever we make people consume that, they want to stay away from politics. So even the kind of knowledge that we consume or make people consume is also very important. Hence, you also need to decolonize the education system so that whoever is going to be consuming or giving information or education to anyone gives the right kind of education that will be able to make you take an informed position based on the material conditions that you are currently facing, and find ways that will change society for us. Then lastly, my question then is on the issue of these online elections that we think that are going to help us. In 2022, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigations from the USA, informed South Africa that its South African Reserve Bank, its central bank was hacked. Our intelligence agencies did not pick it up. Our South African Reserve Bank was hacked. We got that from the USA, from the FBI. We never got that from our intelligence services agencies. Now we want to say that we want to have online, in fact, digital elections. Can we really say that we are ready for that as South Africa, whereby we're not even able to detect where do we put our sovereignty if ever we're going to take that approach? I think those are the questions that we first need to ask ourselves, that are we really capable or competent to provide that? Is the state capable to provide such a situation and also that particular platform? I mean, the state is decapacitated at this point. The state is even failing to provide for IDs at Home Affairs. We say that we want to provide online digital voting. Really, do we think that we're going to make it? How free are we going to be from foreign intelligence influences? So I think those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Greetings to the House at large, most particularly the program director and the panel members. Mine is very short. The speakers have already alluded, but I want to direct my concerns with regards to Mr. Mr. Venen Tadokhotolo. He mentioned that the youth must participate in electoral elections, but it's really unfair for the South African youth, in fact for the youth at large, because participation in voting is aligned with politics. Not every young person wants to be involved in politics. Some wants to be general, peer educators, non-partisan and whatsoever, but they are forced to rally behind a certain political organization or a certain candidate. Now, I think that with regards to that, there is a need for, because IEC is kind of taking this duty, IEC must probably invent a committee that will run these kind of programs in all over South Africa. They must not be done in the eve of elections. You see such programs now. You will see IEC visiting rural areas next year around May. I mean, on the eve of local government elections, of which is wrong. The youth in the villages do not see the need of voting. Because you vote, you are promised everything. When you go and apply, you know that this job is for A, B, C, and D, of which that is wrong. Then I want to go to Mrs. Yes, you mentioned something about the gender quota. I have a problem. They know me. I have a problem with the gender. Why? I'm not saying males or females must do A, B, C, and D. But the problem is that we will think we're taking the best amongst the rest. It has been depicted recently with the Minister of Higher Education. They took a minister, prematurely took her to parliament. The minister showed them flames because I don't want to say she's incapacitated, but we really need to look into this thing of gender balance. I'm not saying that females or males must participate more. It is really important for everyone to participate in all these kind of spaces. But we must have a certain criteria to identify people to represent those who have voted for them. Then let me come to Mrs. Mbambo. Yeah, with regards to the e-voting. You know, I've been at Forte for a couple of years now. They've been voting with online elections. There was IEC before, then there was these private companies who ran elections. I can tell you now, they do not change anything with regards to people who are voting. The numbers remain the same. You will find out the difference in the margin is only 250 or less. So, taking elections to an online system just because we want to lobby the youth, we want the youth to vote once they are in their comfort zones, I don't really think it will assist us in a sense. What we need to do is to go to the youth wherever they are. We must conscientize them, tell them the need, the importance of voting. That's why we fail. All of us. So I think it is premature for the e-voting, honestly, especially in South Africa. And I was glad you mentioned this, that we do things online, but when it comes to politics, it's something else. And it's really something else because we know politics, there's always manipulation wherever. There's a guy that once said that everything that is automatic, it always has a manual. So we don't want to play any games with regards to that. Then I want to re-emphasize this, Mr. Outreach, Mr. Notat, that you must go to rural areas. Do not find comfort by convening this small number of youth and think that you've convened the Eastern Cape at large. That's because you went to Forte, Rhodes, NMU. There are people in deep rural areas. There's Duncan Village. Let's convene that youth because they've got power. The power that Mr. Venve mentioned, that the youth has power, but the power is in the ballot. So we really need to IEC to zoom in those spaces and assist the youth in participation in voting. Thank you.
Greetings, protocols are observed to everybody. My name is Wisanani Wakonomchacho. I am an economics student at Nelson Mandela University. First, I would like to disagree, not even disagree, but to point out the fact that I think the committee is held in order to find solutions and not to clearly state the problems that we already know that we have, right? And secondly of all, I want to state the fact that with IEC, the IEC and other outside entity governments, they are not running them in the business of governance. Now, the business of governance is you're not looking for profit, right? But you are looking to run whatever organization it is as a business, right? So what do I mean by this? Why is youth not voting? Why would an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old who dropped out of school in grade 10, who is classified as ipara, go vote? How is it beneficial to him? It's not, because it doesn't speak to him. Why would a 24-year-old woman who grew up without a dad, who was disadvantaged, why would they go vote? Now, these are the questions. First, we need to ask the questions and then find the solutions. What do I mean by this? When business is looking to provide whatever it is trying to provide, they first focus on target market. Now, if the IEC wants the youth to actually vote more, they need to look at them as target market. Now, what are these target market strategies? You need to make voting look cool to the youth at large. You need to genuinely make voting look cool. Unfortunately, I don't know who the CEO of the IEC Commission is. Does anybody know who the CEO is? I don't think anybody knows. Because we don't know, because it's just not cool. You know, it's not cool. First of all, you need to actually have a face, even if that person is not formally employed, but you need to have an actual face of the IEC to say, you know what, I saw Trevor Noah voting, I'm gonna go vote. You know, because you have someone, because that's how the youth works. TikTok, Instagram, it really needs to be focused on that. Then second of all, what you need to, the IEC can't work alone as an independent party, as an independent organization. It needs to be more integrated into the education system. One, it needs to be more, what do I mean by that? Voting should be taught in life orientation. Life orientation is one of the most important subjects because you learn to say no to drugs, no to this, no to this. Thus, integrate learning about SARS, integrate learning about what voting actually means in before you even get that ID, because you are conscientizing yourself in what voting is, even at an early age. And then another thing that I want to talk about is spiritual. The spirit of democracy, specifically to Craig, the spirit of democracy and in the church. What revolution? What do you think a revolution is in your ideal, and how can we mitigate or rather integrate, but still keeping the differences between the church and politics? How can we combine those two things now? Because if you look at the church with past European colonialism and all of the things that happened, you look at the church and you think, Christianity came because of this, and it was used and it was weaponized in order to keep people under, right? But then now, how can we use that same tool to make people be more aware and actually want to participate in politics without it being seen as a dirty game? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Now we will have our panel members to answer the questions that have been posed. Thank you. Over to you. I think the mics will be coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to start with our corner of political animals, as we have have called them. I don't know if you noticed, today's very hot, eh? It is. It's quite hot, right? And I was wondering, is there a place where I can swim? That it's fine for swimming and not fine for swimming. That I will not get a fine if I go swimming, but that it is okay for me to go swimming. And the reason I ask that question is because when we talk of democracy, my democracy is it your democracy? Are my expectations being met by this democracy? Are your expectations being met by this democracy? And that is where Craig touched on it. Political culture, values, political socialization, life experiences, history, all of those things kick in there on whether we interpret democracy as fine for swimming or democracy as fine for choosing political representation at its very core. If you take it down and break it down to the basics, which is the core business of the IEC, correct, is to facilitate the process of enacting the popular will of who the leaders are. The institutional or institutional arrangements, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all of those institutional structures facilitate the human rights architecture that we call democracy. But whether it has delivered on our expectations, as of course depending on where we sit, right? On which side we sit. Democracy at 30, change versus stagnation was the question that I got. And will we head towards SDG 30? I'm very sorry, my crystal ball is broken. Completely broken. But ultimately, when we look at the global picture around progress towards youth empowerment, gender equality, I'm going to focus on those two in particular because that is our focus today. There has been a lot of progress, but at the same time, there's also been a lot of backsliding. We need to remember that context matters. So when we are talking around, let's say, gender and youth empowerment, NGO funding becomes quite important for programs in order to facilitate this. But if you are in a global environment where NGO funding is becoming less, then you do start seeing some backsliding in terms of those programs. It's not a uniquely South African issue. It is more of a global conversation around how, again, the international structure, right, drives the type of economies, economics student, drives the type of empowerment economies, if you will, that we found. Oh, the gender quota. It's always an interesting question, and I don't even know if this is on. It's always an interesting question, I think, for me, given that when we talk about politics and gender quotas in the country, it's still a rather sensitive issue, firstly, and secondly, it's also a little bit of a new conversation that seems to be emerging, especially within the literature. There are countries, as I've mentioned, Rwanda in particular, that have taken a very solid stance on we will have gender quotas. This is how we will advance women's political empowerment. And they have had a lot of success, but that said, there has been sufficient empowerment programs to prepare women for positions of power, or alternatively to put women in the correct positions of power for which they are already qualified. And the same would go, I think, for male counterparts as well. If a male minister is ill-prepared for a position, then it might get difficult too. The one thing that I can say is that international development research has shown a positive correlation between HDI scores, so Human Development Index scores, gender empowerment, as well as youth empowerment. And that is something that we need to keep in mind. I don't know if I'm missing anything, except my coffee.
Okay, let me just address a few comments. I'm not sure if there were questions. Let me just start with of course, mainly that corner there. So I want to first say that in terms of actively encouraging your peers to participate formally in politics, I think one needs to be able to make historical reference. For instance, to say, let's look at these so-called legacy foundations. that have pulled out of the national dialogue, for instance, right? So you see all of those foundations, something Susulu Foundation, Biko Foundation, and so on and so forth, Mbeki Foundation, right? Now, if you look at those foundations or those names, those were actually our parents' heroes. Our parents went out in 94, they went to vote, and those were their champions, right? Now, we are in South Africa 30 years later, and we are saying we aren't going to take action unless something happens. Imagine if our parents had that same mindset in 1994, to say we aren't going to vote because we'll only vote when something changes or when something happens. And so that was the breakthrough where we had political independence, right? And I think 30 years later, as young people, we must think around what is our, or who are our champions? Because obviously we can't have the same champions as our parents, right? So we must think, who are our champions as young people today? And how do we organize and make a change through the vote for something to happen? I can assure you nothing will happen if we abstain or if we boycott the election. Those who do go and vote will continue to make decisions on our behalf while we sit and protest. So my view is that let's try to approach this from that angle or from that perspective. And also, I think, building on what Craig said when he was speaking about about elections and the difference to a democratic leadership. So I want to say that perhaps in our communication with our peers, we need to try and advance or encourage a rational choice model of voting, where we vote based on issues. Hence, I spoke about the importance of political competence, or at least trying to understand what's happening, trying to track policy implementation. So if we vote based on issues, not to vote based on necessarily identity, or to vote based on the idea that my father voted for this party, my grandfather voted for this party, so automatically I'm going to vote for this party. Let's not vote based on identity. Let's not vote based on identifying parties that our parents voted for, but we need to vote based on our issues today. What our parents were complaining about in 93 is not what we are complaining about in 2025. So I think, I think I've addressed those comments.
Okay. All right, good day, everyone. Okay, I think it's true when they say that the group that identifies with being political animals, it's that one at the back. All right, but sitting here today and listening to the young people posing questions at us, coming from previously disadvantaged areas, we're seeing Forte students. I am so proud. I am a Forte graduate, and when I see you guys coming, so I'm very proud. So I hope that we will see some legal experts analyzing on PCC News, ENCA, social science students I saw. So yes, this is the way to go. We start like this. I want to answer the question that this voting issue or this voting method is a Western issue. Remember this. South Africa, we've got our own electoral management body. And we have a vision. And that vision is to be a preeminent leader in election management. Now, what is the duty of a leader? A leader is somebody that identifies a gap or a problem and tries to address it. Now, the problems that we have when it comes to electoral management, the beauty of democracy is that it's not unique to a certain area. It's got a universality element to it. So, if we are saying that we are bringing e-voting, yes, e-voting is not a unique concept to South Africa, but are we really addressing Western issues or issues that are experienced on the ground in South Africa? Is the issue of long queues a Western problem, or do we also experience it in South Africa? So when we say we want to address these issues, and it's not only one issue, I'm just making an example of the long queues. So we must be careful not to think that this is them versus us, but this is a method and a vehicle towards administering elections in a better way that will be suitable. And the debates that we are having with regards to e-voting gadgets or e-voting machines, we have posed this one to be an open discussion with the committees, with the public, with the electorate to say, what do you think will work? I was happy to hear respondents saying that, hang on, but there is cyber security threats and they're coming from outside. Our own security intelligence agencies were not able to pick that one up. Then we must find ways so that this model that we are going to be adopting addresses those cyber threats that we have identified. But to say that it's a Western issue, I don't think so. Another issue that I want to talk about is the issue of activism. Our colleagues have been speaking about being a part of the process. But what I am seeing right now is that the youth is running away from their own future. We want to hide on TikTok, we want to hide on YouTube. I was actually very catched when one of the respondents was saying that if you guys have all these ways of making elections appealing, yes, you can try to make it appealing, yes, you can try to enhance the systems, but the crux of the matter is that democracy is not working for us. And if it's not working for us, then we are going to run away. Is running away a solution? No, because it's not going to solve the solution. And remember this, your future does not start tomorrow, it starts today. So you work on it today. So I want to also just paint a picture to the young people that if you are not a part of the process, then the process the process is going to leave you behind. And you are going to find yourself in a space where you're always complaining. So what we are trying to say, when Mr. Mvenene actually alludes to say that be a part of the process, get involved. And if you see that the policies are not working for you, find ways of channeling those policies so that they work for you. For example, there's one thing that we are neglecting is that how is policy or law made? Remember this, for something or for an issue to become a policy or law, it starts at a social level. So for example, within the space, we see that we've got this certain constitution or got this law, but it's not working for us. So it starts as a social problem. Then we say we need it to be amended so that it is realistic to the challenges that we have on the ground. Now, how can it become law? It starts at a social level, then it moves up to become a political level where it is debated in Parliament. And then Parliament will pass a bill, and that bill will become law. So instead, if we are saying that as educated as we are, here we are unemployed. Here we are with all these important and very brave discussions that we are bringing, high-level intellect and insightful remarks and commentary that we are providing here. But we are unable to make the system work for us. Hence, Mr. Mvenene is saying that if we want to engage, let us engage in a purposeful manner. Let us not contest or protest in a way that is not going to yield any results. Rather, let us raise uncertainty, let us raise engagements, and when we go to the ballot papers, we go there at an informed perspective and in a manner that is going to work for us. Then also, I like the question that comes across to say that we need to also engage with our social influences. To say that voting is not appealing to the young people. It's not convenient and it's not flexible enough. It looks rigid. Unfortunately, that is how government sometimes operates, because they don't want to find themselves in contravention with the law. Remember this, everything that we do is legislated, and everything that we do is within the confines of the law itself. So that is why sometimes you will find that the government will only, after everyone else has moved away from Facebook, only then you see them on Facebook. And when the whole country has moved to TikTok and Instagram, only then they are planning to go on Instagram and TikTok. So these discussions are good to have. It's good to listen to what you guys are saying so that we can integrate and have units within our departments and our various institutions that are going to propel for this change that is relevant and suitable and appealing enough for the young people. And then lastly, I want to speak to the students that say that we went to the city hall, we registered to vote, but we were turned away. Ne? Imagine if we had e-voting and you were able to vote without restrictions. Would you be turned away from the voting station? No. I want us to not look at everything in a negative manner. But if you are somebody that wants to be progressive and wants things to work for you, let us not look at it in a negative manner. For example, if we had e-voting and at the voting station you were turned away, remember this, hence I said everything that we do has to be within the confines of the law. So the law says that you must register where you ordinarily reside. Meaning that if you reside in East London, for example, and you register, and then your address will determine then which voting station you should be voting at. Now, if you register to vote, it does not automatically mean that you can vote at any voting station. You are registered, yes, and that is a precondition for you to be able to vote. But your address and where you are registered will determine which voting station you should go to. So meaning at that voting station, you should have been redirected to say, yes, you are registered, but you are supposed to vote in VD this or in this venue and not the City Hall voting station. So let us be engaged, let us be a part of the process so we understand these things. Had we known or had we been a part, we would have known. For example, I was very proud to hear the other gentleman saying that I was a part of the process, I was a party agent. So that means that you are certain you have an understanding and you are engaged and you are a part of the process. Then your understanding of the systems and how these things work will be heightened. Thank you.
Thank you. I know time is running short, so I'm going to make this as quick as possible. Is it Vuyisa? Economic student. Thank you for your question. Perhaps before I get to that, just very quickly, because what I'm about to say, I think, ties in with what you asked. This notion of Western issues, Western thinking, and I think it relates to what I said about decolonization earlier on. Is it important to ask where information comes from? Or ideas or ideologies? Absolutely. But I think it's more important to ask whether ideas are beneficial for humanity. Does that make sense? In other words, it doesn't so much matter where this idea comes from. The question is it applicable to human development and prosperity and security? So if I may quote China's paramount leader from 1978 to 1989, Deng Xiaoping, who said, "It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white. If the cat catches mice, it is a good cat." Controversial statement because of my gender and skin color. I think, I'm going to say we Africans. You know, there's this expression about someone having a chip on the shoulder. I think we're inclined to behave in that way, and understandably so, because of our continent's history. But I think we need to be careful of that understandable emotion We need to manage it so that it doesn't get in the way of our perspective. And that's why I'm careful about, I'm all for decolonization, but I first want to know what you mean when you say decolonization. And it brings us to the point about colonization by the West, often using the Christian faith or Christianity. You use the word weaponized. I'll do my best to answer your questions as briefly as possible. Theses have been written about this or ought to be written about it. So let me do what I can to satisfy your questions. Let me leave the question of revolution to the end, if I may. I grew up as a young boy and teenager with a grandfather who was a World War II soldier. I'm just giving context. After my studies at Rhodes, I joined the SANDF. This was 2010. Why do I share this with you? I don't have an issue with arms or guns or weapons. If I had, I wouldn't have entered that context willingly, but I did. I appreciate the military. I appreciate any police service that does its job, because these institutions have functions that need to be fulfilled. Why am I talking about weaponry or arms or guns? Because you used the word weaponized. The issue is not whether I like or dislike a pistol. The issue I have with a pistol is how it's used. I am a Christian. I don't ask, well, I do ask, who is Christ? And when I have the answer, I'm at peace about it. The next question is, how do people use Christianity? Christianity per se isn't necessarily the issue. The issue was, how did Western governments exploit the faith for political reasons? I say Western governments in the historical context, but we have several governments in contemporary times, some of them in Africa, who exploit religion for political reasons, irrespective of what that religion may be. It could be Islam, it could be Christianity, it could be traditional African religion. And that exploitation will never end. The best we as citizens or youth can do is be aware of it, manage it, and mitigate it, advocate against it. And the primary tool in response to that reality is education, something I spoke about earlier on. You mentioned the combination of church and politics. The church is part of wider civil society. I'm all for the church encouraging, and it has the potential to do this, I'm all for the church encouraging political engagement. But there's a difference between that and church taking charge of governance, specifically civil governance. And that's why this idea of church-state separation is so important. It's a very loaded idea that needs a proper conversation to understand it. But many people hear church-state separation, and they think immediately the church and state should have nothing to do with one another. That is not what church-state separation means. It just means that each one of those bodies have a specific responsibility, and the church must stick to its responsibility, and the state ought to stick to its responsibility. And that's why I don't believe a church leader, or whatever word you want to use, reverend, pastor, dominee, muruti, that person shouldn't be a political leader. He or she needs to resign their position and then move into the other lane, and vice versa. I don't know if I'm getting close to, or if I've already answered your question, but just to be clear, yes, the church does have a role to play as part of wider civil society. But just because, even if a local church decides to play that role, it needs to do it carefully, according to how it interprets Scripture. That on its own is a separate conversation, but also according to the Constitution. And it has to keep human development front and center. For me, since I'm part of that organization or body, and we're talking about the potential for the church to play such a role, I believe that someone who believes you are created in the image of God, that is powerful incentive for me to look after your interests. And if only for that reason, I think, again, the church has a role to play. I haven't answered your question about revolution. When we ask what revolution is, we're actually asking how should change take place. And I define revolution as quick or immediate, often violent change that turns the status quo upside down. I personally believe in change that is not revolutionary in the violent sense, but that is carefully considered based on scientific, not Western, scientific principles, and again, that aims at human well-being. That means it's inclusive, it's sustainable, and it's just. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions and answers. I think at the start of this gathering, I had appreciated the presence of the ladies that are in the venue. But funny enough, when question and answer time came, there was no woman who asked a question. And it was, oh, I'm so sorry. I think that I will give only to the ladies, but I just want to caution on the time because we are supposed to finish at 1. So just to keep the questions short, I'm so sorry. Gentlemen, the next time, give ladies a chance. Be mindful. So I'll give to the ladies just a round of questions, maybe 2 or 3 that have questions to ask, and then we move on to the next item. Thank you. Over to you, SCC.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Greetings to the house. My name is Sisi Port-Kalisisa, and I'm a student activist at the University of Fort Hare, and I'm also a law student. I have a problem with speaking after these ones. I know these ones that you call political animals. I know them. These ones, you can't speak after them. And I'm also like partially captured by the previous speakers. But what I wanted to say, my point was, I don't have a question though. What I wanted to say, my discussion was on the IEC saying the youth is not lazy to vote. It is not lazy to vote. We're not lazy to do anything. We can do it. It's just that there has to be courage, and right now the youth is very, very discouraged. We are very discouraged as the youth, because why would I want to go and vote for people to sit in parliament and deliberate on a future that they may not be present in tomorrow? So we're going to have my Saturday speaking about my future, but AG, will you be there tomorrow to experience that same future? So that's the reason why we are so discouraged to vote. And also on the visibility of the ICC on the ground, of the IEC on the ground. I won't lie, I'm from Ekailicha, Harar, and Lovin. And I'm going to say ilokishi and even up on the informal settlement in Lovin. I have never seen an IEC official on the ground there. Tina, I don't think as a community like Pana in Lovin, I think only 50% of youth in a phone Pan. Yeah, I'm gonna say that it's Cape Town, but 50% of us have phones there because we have crimes, and there's also the economic side of it. Yeah, so I've never seen officials there actually speaking to the youth in terms of voting. So we don't even watch TV no more these days. And it's rare to even see an ad of the IEC when I'm on YouTube. They're watching a vlog ka Grace Mundlana. I have never seen the IEC passing by saying, "Hey, hi, I'm here. Can you please register to vote?" Like I'm saying. And also what the speaker said, sorry I didn't capture the name. They spoke about saying that you must have a cool person. If I see a certain influencer voting, then I'm going to vote. They've tried that. We've seen that on the past elections. But did that encourage us to vote? No, it didn't. And also on the part of the e-voting thing, it sounds good, I'm not going to lie. Fourth industrial industry is coming. 2030 is here. So anything that has digital, it's needed. It's like, we are developing in that. But this is South Africa. This is South Africa. That's the first thing that we have to think. This is South Africa. South Africa doesn't actually invest much in technology. There, our money doesn't go on technology. We are underdeveloped when it comes to that. We are, even though our development is very stagnant at the moment, but we have to also bear in mind in saying that if our resources, we don't put it in things like innovation and technology, some things are just going to be very good on paper, but practicality, it's very, very debatable. So that's what I wanted to say. But as the speaker said, a lot still needs to be done. A lot has been said. It's time to do now. So we've been having these conversations. We want to see the IEC there, Eluleka Primary School, in Ekwakulo Senior Secondary School. We are there, 18-year-olds are there. They just don't know what even IEC is. They have no knowledge. So we want to see them on the ground. We want to see them where we are as young people. Yeah, well, thank you very much.
I think one of the other hands were here and this table.
Good day, everyone. My name is Oratile Goma. I'm doing my third year in journalism at Nelson Mandela University. My first question will go to Mr. Mvene, which states as follows. Given the budget constraints, what cost-effective strategies beyond technology can the IEC implement to meaningfully boost youth voter turnout? And how can the energy and solidarity seen in the issue-based protests like the hashtag Fees Must Fall be sustained and transformed in consistent electoral participation? And also my second question will go to Mr. Craig. Considering the high youth unemployment, poverty, and household responsibilities, what practical measures can be taken to remove barriers to political participation and empower young South Africans to become active and informed voters? And lastly, but not least, to Mrs. Mbambo, how will the IEC build public trust in e-voting, considering the widespread of mistrust in democratic institutions? And how will voter education campaign be adapted to ensure all that citizens, including those with low digital literacy, understand and have confidence in new voting processes? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take the lady there and then the last lady from Rhodes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry about that. My name is Tembisa Mchiba. I'm from it.and News, based in Alice. I know that we may sound as if we are repeating ourselves, but it is equally important to give credit where credit is due. Having said that, I would like by commending IEC for this kind of engagement and for inspiring our youth to become responsible and active citizens of the Republic of South Africa and empowering them with leadership skills. My first question was going to be directed to Prof, but Prof, as I can see, is no longer with us. But definitely, because this is also online, she will also hear my question. I wanted to double check with her if in her research or in the findings of her research, do they have the lessons and solutions that can our youth today or here today take away from the research, as well as our government, to have a working and vibrant democracy to change the picture that they have presented today in the next elections? And my question is relatively speaking to the unhappy group of people in her research about our democracy, which is a great cause for concern and aims to motivate our youth today to become agents of change. I am saying this because the purpose of research is not only to identify problems, but also to provide solutions. Lastly, but not the least, my other question will be directed to the IEC, the lady over there. She talked about the voting online and the processes. I know that this is a pilot, guys. Your project, it's a pilot. But, before you embark to any kind of a pilot or kind of a process of changing processes, I think you also need to do a groundwork. Understanding the environment that you're operating in. We are in remote areas. Taking these programs to remote areas, it's also a waste of resources of our country. I am saying this because I am running a newspaper, a community newspaper, which is based in Alice, in Raymond Mhlaba. And most of community newspapers are operating in very remote areas where we know definitely, although we want to embrace this new technology and slowly but surely we're migrating to the digital environment, but we know at times it's going to take years and years and years to adjust and fully migrate to digital media. But because it's a trend, we are also, want to embrace all these platforms. And we welcome them, believe me, you or not, and they've got their pros and cons. But as government, you need to do your research before you invest to any kind of research. I thank you.
Dumelang, my name is Malebu and I am a journalist from Rhodes University. I just wanted to ask the lady here about the e-voting and all that. I think it's quite interesting. I just want to know how and why do you guys believe that e-voting could increase youth voter turnout in South Africa? And in what ways does e-voting reduce human error during voting counts, okay? And then, do you believe that if you guys start with e-voting, it would speed up the process of the release of results? Is that a possibility? And then, how would the IEC make sure that people trust the e-voting system? I mean, there's corruption everywhere. And what measures are in place to stop hacking and cyber attacks? And then to the gentleman here, regarding the matter of comfort at home and so on. Do you think South Africa has taught young people to truly understand and live democracy, or have we only taught them on how to vote? And do you think older people have become too comfortable or too used to the way things are? And is that teaching young people not to care about voting? And how can we encourage young people to get involved even when their homes or communities do not talk about politics? Thank you.
I'm very sorry, I know you did mention time. My name is Unati Sonamila Wakakobok. I'm the station manager of Rhodes Music Radio. It might not even be a question. Maybe there might be a question there somewhere. The thing is that I want us to think around the institutions of higher learning. And we've got various institutions right here. And I'll speak from the side of Rhodes, but also having studied at Walter Sisulu. And even if we use those just two as an example, Walter Sisulu is very politically active and, you know, they're robust and we know them for that. And then you get Rhodes where there isn't really much political activity, and that may be attributed to the fact that people want to leave with their degrees. And so if you're in a space where you're not really getting room to actively participate in politics in the place where you're being groomed for leadership, I don't see how then that encourages you to participate when you are outside of that space. Because in essence, will get you out of school. And so essentially, what else? That's all you know. And then we get this whole thing, because Iwusu is so politically robust and that they're seen, looked down upon. To say, progressive. When we look down on political activism, it already gives the impression bikho involved. So if uthina ngendlela esiphila ngayo nendlela esitreatana ngayo nesijajana ngayo says that ibimele basingabikho politically active kuze sibe kanti singabantu aba-progressive, then into nezas encourage perhaps into yokubana sivote, because we're being trained to not say anything, but then simane sinikwa ii-campaigns that say your vote counts, and it's like it's not counting now.
So I just have a little thing to say. I'm Bailie, I'm also from Rhodes. And for me, it's what was raised here amongst one of the other students who are asking questions. Yes, we understand that the IEC's role is to help with the whole election process. But when they feel that there is no option for them to elect, what can we do about that? Yes, we can't decide who are the politicians that are in power, but seemingly when they are ballot papers there and youth that are not responding or don't feel confident in the people that are there for them to vote for, what can we then do as a society to make sure that we find eligible leaders that are on those ballots when it's time for us to vote?
Fast. Thank you so much. I just want to apologize for Prof. Steyn-Kotze. She's busy with an interview inside. She didn't leave the venue, but she's just busy with interviews. So we'll just take the questions directed to the other speakers. Just keep them short, the responses short, maybe 2 minutes. Then we'll wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, I was hoping Aviwe would speak first to give me more time to reflect on the questions. Thank you for those questions. Good, important questions. Ms. Koma, what I heard you ask pretty much was what to do. What do we do to bring the youth closer to the voting stations? And I asked that question with you while understanding We need to continue being political animals between elections. As important as voting is, it's not enough. I think the question you ask is a systemic one. What do I mean by that? To respond to the issue you highlight, that we've highlighted here this morning, requires systemic changes. Changes that are initiated by different stakeholders or actors placed at different locations within that system. So one actor, for example, would be the IEC. Another actor would be you sitting here. Another actor is one of the panelists sitting here on stage. So when it comes to youth-led households, and I want to be specific here, for me it's really a concern if it's someone, let's say, under the age 21 years or younger. If we ask why is a household being led by this person, the first obvious question is, what happened to the parents? I don't think I'm going to answer your question, but we're working together towards the answer. What happened to the parents? Either they died, which for other than natural reasons, which is a systemic problem, probably, or both or one of the parents left, which means it's a values issue. Now, those parents growing up, it might be that they just don't know better. That doesn't justify it, but it gives us context. So what were they exposed to growing up that prepared them for leading households? And I have to ask that about families within the circles I operate in. I've got to ask it of my own household that I grew up in. If I don't ask that question, if I don't try and understand their context, I'm going to be very hard on them concerning how they parented me. Now, I mean, I'm privileged compared to the situation where a 21-year-old or under is leading a household, but we have to ask those sorts of questions. And once we've got the answer to what happened to the parents, we have to go to that space and try and solve that issue there. Is it a medical health or service delivery issue? Or is it a values issue? These parents simply didn't value their family enough to stick around. And how do we change that? Civil society has a fundamental role to play there. What is every person's worldview? Why do I exist? What is my purpose? And like I said earlier on, do I value myself? I think you'll find very few parents who value themselves and don't value their children. So I'm trying to answer we're working together on this. I hope that's helpful. Then, was it Malibu? Malibu, thank you, from Rhodes University. Has South Africa taught youth about democracy or how to vote? I like that distinction you make there. Because you're asking the question because you know there's a difference. Just teaching someone how to vote, how to process the steps at a station, how to register, is different. It's part of, but not entirely, cultivating a democratic culture. Who is South Africa? Right? We have to be more specific. Have the actors responsible for cultivating a democratic culture done so? The short answer is either no, or if I'm going to be more generous, not enough. And there cannot be a primary reliance on the state when it comes to this issue. There cannot be. Because our default assumption has to be it's not in the interest of those in power to cultivate a democratic culture. That has to be our default assumption. I'm not saying that's how the people in power are thinking. I'm saying that has to be our default assumption. And let's be open to them proving us wrong. When I spoke about comfort, I was actually, it was partly a commentary on class. So the more comfortable one is in one's facilities or luxuries, the less need one has. That potentially could turn one away from or prevent one from being as politically active as one otherwise would have been. That said, and I want to be sensitive here, I think it's possible for people who are struggling to get comfortable with their struggles. I say that respectfully. I think it's possible. I'm not saying that's the case with everyone, but it is possible. In East London, I think I'm going to guess we all drive past homeless people virtually on a daily basis. And I can't help but think, if I were to offer this person a job, hard manual labor, would he accept it? Or is he comfortable in his circumstances, as horrendous as they are? So I don't know if South Africa's youth have become comfortable in their circumstances. What do the figures tell us? If the youth isn't voting, does that mean they're comfortable with their discomfort? And that's why I said early on, I might be wrong. My view is that the more uncomfortable things are, the more politically active we should become. And we can't be politically active with the hope that we arrive at certain results without voting. And when it comes to the options before us, we have to accept and make peace with the fact that it's always going to be a choice between, if I may use this term, evils. Party X, Y, and Z. Which of the three options, for me, is the lesser evil? I don't have to like the party. How can we encourage young people to get involved even when their homes aren't talking politics? I was just privileged to have people intervene in my life to change my way of thinking. So that the answer to your question is, you have to. I have to. We have to go into circles like this, and we have to start conversations with people that challenge the way we think.
Okay, thanks, Craig. I'll start with Bailie. Bailie, your question is, if the ballot paper does not have anyone that represents you, then what do you do? The question is, why not be a part of the process? Why not contest elections as young people? Why not be engaged and see yourself in that ballot paper and see how many more young people will rally and support another that they can resonate with? All right. Then, the second question, yes. The second question is on the issue of visibility, and I should have addressed this one because it even came out on the first round. Visibility. The Electoral Commission is visible, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. We have a program that we call School Democracy Education Program. We identify schools, whether at tertiary institutions. For example, even Forte, I'm very shocked by the fact that you guys don't know. I saw Forte had a registration campaign in collaboration with the IEC Buffalo City office that was running, I think it was last week. I saw even on a portal, you even had posters for that. So it means that we are a little bit ignorant in the spaces that we are in, that we are finding ourselves in as the young people. So, the Electoral Commission does engage with tertiary institutions. It does engage with schools. We do roll out school democracy programs at the schools where we engage the students so that they can become prepared. We engage them at a young age of 16 years so that they can be engaged and they can understand that, yes, right now they are in a protected environment at school, but outside of that, they are citizens and citizens with needs. And then when we engage them on civic and democracy education. Those are discussions that are sort of like the one that is unfolding inside of this room. An understanding of your civic rights and your civic responsibilities. And then we also have balloting education that you will find only closer to an election, where we are educating and reinforcing on what is a ballot paper, what counts as a counting ballot, what counts as a spoiled ballot, because it is no use casting your ballot but it's not going to count. So it must be a meaningful exercise that has results, definite results. So we do engage with schools, we do engage with communities as well. Whenever we have got community meetings at a ward level, whether it's a stakeholder engagement, IGRs, your intergovernmental organizations, we do engage. However, if there are spaces that you are a part of as the young people in this room, and you feel that you would like to invite us, please do extend the invitation so that we can explore our visibility beyond. Thank you. And then another question that was asked was on the issue of the e-voting. Remember this. This is one of those steps that we are taking. Remember, you said for us to have research or for us to adopt a model that is going to be winning or championing what we are trying to address as IEC South Africa for our electorate, then we need to understand what the people are saying on the ground. And this is one of those steps. This platform is where we want to see the contributions and the discussions that are coming on the ground. What are the people saying? What are their concerns? So that whenever we are adopting that particular model, it can be one that best suits the realities of the ordinary electorate. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll deal with the two questions. I think one, they were both from the student here. The first one spoke about the funding constraints of the IEC, right? And I think the colleagues working for the IEC can also speak to this one. But I think this compels us to think of low-cost but high-impact strategies. And I think that e-voting, as has been explained at length by the colleague here, is one of those steps towards low-cost, high-impact strategies. And of course, I believe that even when e-voting is introduced, it will be a hybrid kind of a model. I do not think that you will only be compelled to vote electronically. You will be able to go to a voting station if you prefer the traditional paper-based voting method. I believe that you will be at liberty to make that choice. But I think what keeps re-emerging from the floor is the idea of making voting cool. And perhaps I think the colleagues can consider that instead of, for instance, paying, for, expensive ads on YouTube channels, on the SABC, and so on and so forth, perhaps colleagues can consider seriously partnering with micro-influencers. Because let's be honest, what matters most is reach and not fame. And most of us as young people, we are extremely connected to micro-influencers, to a point where if they fight in the Eastern Cape, we are all stuck discussing why our micro-influencers are fighting within Ipondo. Right? And I also think that we need to strengthen our partnerships. For instance, universities and the IEC. I believe that it shouldn't just be for TE, it should be all universities that are sharing information from the IEC on their email systems to our students. Whether it's a by-election, whether it's a registration information, whatever it may be, our universities, I believe, carry a civic responsibility, and they must help in expanding the reach of the IEC. Again, I'm responding within the resource constraints that the IEC faces. In fact, if you Google this or you look it up, you'll find that in 2021, there was a medium-term expenditure framework that declared that the government aims to cut the IEC's budget by 800 million within a space of 3 years. So hence I said when I was speaking that whatever we think or we talk about, we must keep in mind the budget constraints that this institution faces. And then the second question is about how do we maintain the Fees Must Fall momentum. I think we don't need to necessarily maintain it, because remember, the idea is to convert protest solidarity into ballot solidarity, right? So we can protest, we can be involved in politics of the spectacle, and we can garner media attention, and do all manner of performances. We can perform activism, but if we do not go to the ballot, if we can't organize ourselves, quick example, one organization called Abahlale Basemjondolo do this thing where in every election, they throw their weight as an organization behind one political party. And they do that to make a statement. For instance, if they're unhappy with the yellow party, they will then publicly declare that they're going to support the red party. And that is their way of making a statement. If as young people we said, fees must fall, we want fee-free higher education, decolonize the curriculum and so on and so forth, then need to vote based on those issues. Parties that want our vote must make central, must make a priority those issues, whether it's job creation, growing the economy, building more universities, more TVET colleges, more skills development, whatever it may be. We must use our numbers collectively to say that if you want our support as an organized group, if we're scattered and fragmented, we can forget. But we must try to emulate that fees must fall model where we all met in one WhatsApp group throughout these universities and TVET colleges. And we are able to organize ourselves and make it a point that our vote makes a clear statement to whoever is in power or whoever is not addressing our issues as young people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we are done with the Q&A session. I'll call upon Ms. Lulama Sokobile to do a summation of our event today. And then after that, it will be a vote of thanks done by Ms. Ndabeni. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just here to do a summation. What are we taking home? What are we taking to the spaces that we occupy after this event? Dr. Steyn-Kotze, she identified the challenges that hinder the youth from participating. She mentioned socio-economic problems. She mentioned youth empowerment. But in order to aid that, she said that there must be equal opportunities to balance these barriers that will then assist in aiding the challenges that are faced by the youth. She mentioned that a survey it says that the young black female aged 19 and 24 is hopeless. And that is the group that we want as the IEC. When we go out and do civic and democracy education in schools, in tertiary institutions, that is the youth that who is our audience. And it is indeed hopeless because they do not participate in our events. And Mrs. Mbambo, she spoke about e-voting. E-voting is still in a proposal stage from the IEC. The document is available in the IEC website. If you go to the internet, you can indulge yourself on the research that has already been done by the IEC, and you can actually give feedback to that research that is done by the IEC. She gave us a brief explanation of what it is, what is e-voting, and the two types of e-voting being the controlled and the uncontrolled electronic voting. So you can indulge yourself into the document and submit your feedback. The IEC will very much appreciate that. And then Mr. Mvenene, he encouraged the youth to take charge, to take control. That is the whole purpose of this event, for the youth to take charge, to take control. He spoke about ballot power, which I like very much, because when we go out and do civic and democracy education, we educate the electorate on the power of a single vote. The youth doesn't understand that there is great power in just one vote. So if we can go out and echo that there is power in just a single vote. He also spoke about political climatization and how do we get the youth to be politically competent? How do we get them to know that before you vote, you must register? How do we get them to know that at the age of 16, you can register to vote, but you will only vote when you are 18 years? So it's the responsibility is on us, the privileged youth, the youth that is here. We are privileged because we are exposed to this information. But what about the people who are staying in Harare, in Khayelitsha, who have never seen an IEC official? It means now the lady from the law student from Eforte can go back to her community and be that and encourage the youth from Harare to know about the electoral processes, to participate in electoral democracy. And then we also heard from Mr. Bailie. He said that to be human is to be political. He also posed a question that said, do we want democracy? Do we? I'm asking, do we? Yes, we do want it. But then, what's our problem? Why are we not voting if we want democracy? Because in order for democracy to grow, in order for democracy to flourish, we must vote. Yes, we must vote. So it's up to us then, the people who are in this room, to be our mouthpiece as the IEC, to go out there and encourage the youth that is in the spaces that you occupy. Now, as the IEC, we have that responsibility, but we want to partner with you then to share that responsibility of ensuring that the youth that is already registered, they go to the voting station. The youth that is not registered, they ensure that they are registered. Lastly, I want to encourage everyone to take this responsibility with achieving what the IEC wanted to achieve with this event, and pose a question: are you comfortable with your discomfort? Clearly, the statistics shows that the youth is in discomfort, but it also means that they are comfortable with the discomfort because they are not going out to the polls to vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lulu. Mr. Ndabeni, can you come to do a vote of thanks? Then we close the program. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Program Director, and good afternoon to everyone. I was tempted, Program Director, to use the famous words of people who are doing a vote of thanks. And that is to say, well, mine, it's an easy one. It's just to say thank you. But unfortunately, in South Africa, nothing is easy. You have to put some spice in everything that you are doing. Let me then get on to my task. It gives me great honor to give the vote of thanks for an event of this magnitude. Well, with that being said, if you think of the concept saying thank you to someone, that is basically showing gratitude. That is why I'm here today, to show gratitude to everyone who has attended. Well, if you think, Okanye, me thinking of attitude, I'm reminded of the words of another writer. in far countries. William Arthur Watt, ningamazi ke nina Mr. Notata. And his famous words are, let me quote, feeling gratitude and not expressing it is like wrapping a present and not giving it to someone. Feeling gratitude but not expressing it. There's that gift, but you are keeping it for yourself and not for the person. So basically, I'm here to just give you that gift of gratitude. So with those words, we as the IEC want to express our deepest gratitude to you all that have attended this event, to you all that have made this event to what it is. It was a successful and great event. Thank you. Let me specifically thank our panel in front, seated here at the front. We appreciate you and thank you so much. We also want to thank the different stakeholders in attendance today. Attendees from WUSU, that is Walter Sisulu University, attendees from Nelson Mandela University, attendees from Rhodes University, attendees from the different radio stations, the clergy, and all other stakeholders that I would have missed. Thanks for your attendance and thanks for the fruitful engagements. Thank you. To the IEC staff from the different local offices, we appreciate you, colleagues. Thank you. To the technical team, our sound and media guys, to Julie and Sanders committee, without you guys, this event would not have been this beautiful. Thanks, guys. Last but definitely not least, the two people responsible for us being here today and also responsible for the entire event. Let me take this opportunity to say thank you. Words, actually, I am referring to our project managers, Ms. Stenworth, Joleen Steyn-Kotze, and Mr. Sanda, not data. Words alone are not enough to give thanks to you, but what can I say? Thank you for your hard work, guys. I almost forgot. To Mr. Sanda, not data, to Ms. Ulula Masokobile, and to, of course, Mr. Zugondabeni. Yes. Thanks for being able to feature in this program. Colleagues and guests of the IEC, thank you.
Thank you, Tazooks. I think we have come to the end of our program. I would also like to take this opportunity to just say thank you to everyone that honored our invitation and took time out of your busy schedules to come and join us and listen to us, hoping that this information that was shared here today will be spread to the other people that were not in attendance. We are entrusting you with all the information that was shared today, that at least when you go home or to your respective places of residence, you'll be able to spread the word that indeed IEC is visible. To the table at the back, we are visible. With that being said, thank you so much. I think lunch will be served outside. And then we can come and eat inside. Thank you so much and travel safely back home. Thank you.